can I first of all welcome everyone to the meeting this morning to Development Control Committee A at Mid-Suffolk District Council. First of all, can I just remind you of some of the domestic arrangements? The WCs are situated outside the meeting room opposite the stairs. There's also cold water available in the breakout area just outside by the meeting room. If the fire alarm does sound, can we please leave the meeting room or the council chamber straight away, follow the fire exit signs, and we are to gather on the training pitch of Ipswich Town Football Club next door, and please do not re-enter the building until we are told it is safe to return. Can I just ask everyone to double check that your mobiles are either switched off or on silent? There is a tradition that if they ring, it's a £5 donation to the Chairman's charity. I'd like to remind everyone present that the meeting will be broadcast live today on the internet and will be capable of being viewed and repeatedly viewed. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and press may record, film or photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. Finally, can members and officers please ensure that you press the microphones for speaking and turn off your microphones when you have finished. So, just for the benefit of members of the public, there may be you may not have been to a planning committee, development control committee before at Mid-Suffolk District Council, so I'll just run through for your benefit who's going to do what. On my right-hand side here on the front row, and myself, we are the district councillors that have been elected, and therefore we will be making a decision on the applications before us today. If we represent the area in which the application has come forward, you have to cross the room and sit on the other side, and you may speak on the item but may not vote. So you cannot at Mid-Suffolk vote on applications within your own ward. On the top table here, we have Ian DePrez, who's our legal advisor. We have Gemma, and we'll have various planning officers from the back coming and going who'll be presenting the applications. Gemma's the senior planning officer, and Robert Carmichael, who's here to make sure that everything runs smoothly. I think that just about covers everything. When you do come up, you'll come up to the microphone on the front row. You have 3 minutes, and it's done by an egg timer, and we do keep to 3 minutes, and if you go over, you will be cut in mid-flow, so please do keep to the 3 minutes. And we'll call you up according to the list we have. So, moving on to the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence and substitutions, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Field, Councillor Mansell and Councillor Turner, and today we have 3 substitutes of Councillor Mike Norris for Councillor Field, Councillor Andrew Mellon for Councillor Sarah Mansell, and Councillor Keith Wellham for Councillor Wendy Turner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, to receive any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members. Councillor Norris.
Thank you. I do know the officer concerned on item 7E, application DC 19-00174, through both serving on a committee for an access for all project at Needham Market Railway Station. So I thought I ought to declare that as an outside interest.
And so that's a non-pecuniary interest. Thank you for
Indeed.
that.
Thank you.
Any other declarations? No. Thank you. Any declarations of lobbying of members? Yep. Which application number? 7C. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? No. Any declarations of personal site visit by members? No. Okay, the next item is, and it's in the late papers, the latest version, is the confirmation of the minutes held on the meeting on the 26th of June 2019. And these appear on pages 1 through to pages 12. Page 11. Our members, everyone had an opportunity who was at the meeting, and they're a fair reflection of the meeting? Are you happy that I sign those accordingly? Is that agreed? Yes. Agreed? Was it? Yep. I think there are 4 of us there. Okay, thank you. We'll sign those after. We will keep, item number 6, first of all, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Do we have any, please?
None received, Chair.
Okay. Straight on to the schedule of planning applications. We will keep to the order as in the papers, but item 7A DC 18-02146, land to the north and west of School Road, Elmswell, has been withdrawn. So we'll go straight on to item 7B, which is DC 19-01602, land on the north side of Norton Road, Thurston. And over to you, Vincent.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen. First item on the agenda is a reserved matters application for 87 dwellings on land north of Norton Road, Thurston. On the screen at the moment we have a copy of the outline planning permission, and you'll notice that it is a consent for residential development up to 200 homes, and there is an associated Section 106 agreement with the outline, and on the screen I've identified the key clauses within that Section 106 agreement. At the time of considering the outline application earlier this year, there was a master plan, and that's shown on the right of the screen. As you can see, there's an existing area of woodland in the northeast corner, a proposed significant area of open space to the north, and then the development itself spreads northwards from Norton Road. On the left, running the entire length of the western edge of the site, is Meadow Lane. We'll come back to that a little later. So in terms of the proposal before you, the reserve matters, the map on the right shows within the red boundary the area that you're considering today. And what you are considering is the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of development. You are not considering access, because that was resolved at outline planning stage. Just to put us in the picture, the red dot is Thurston, just to the east of Bury St Edmunds, so it's in the far west of the district, close to the A14. For those members who are not so familiar with Thurston as others, on that screen I've demonstrated where some of the key facilities are in the village. So the black star is the application site. The white dot is actually the location of the new primary school, and Suffolk County Council is proceeding at pace with developing the plans for that site. So that came out of the outline planning permission earlier this year. The yellow dot is the Victoria Public House. The blue dot is the Community College. The red dot is the railway station, and there are other elements included on that slide. So the site is within walking distance of all the key facilities in the village. In terms of the site itself, it does sit outside of the settlement boundary for Thurston within the existing adopted local plan. But of course it does benefit from outline planning permission. And members will recall that Thurston has experienced significant pressure for new development, and there are a number of planning permissions on the books for some 800 dwellings around the village. Thurston does benefit from having a neighbourhood plan. It's one of the first in the district to have a neighbourhood plan. On the screen, within the red areas, I think you'll just see A, B, C, D, other sites that already benefit from planning permission for residential development. So the site we're looking at is the orange one. The settlement boundary, I've just highlighted there in black. In terms of your emerging joint local plan, the site for the reserve matters is shown with the black dot, and actually now within that plan, and we have to accept that currently it has limited weight as a planning consideration, the settlement boundary has been extended to incorporate the whole of this site because it now benefits from planning permission. The neighbourhood plan itself, just going back to the neighbourhood plan, carries significant weight because it is now an adopted plan. So in the report I've gone into quite a bit of detail in terms of the parish council's objections. I've also analysed the proposals in the context of the neighbourhood plan in the report. So in summary, there is a list of the representations from Thurston Parish Council. Each of those is looked at in detail in the report, but for the sake of comprehensiveness, I've put them on the screen. So, on the left, you have the outline master plan, and on the right, you have the reserve matters details that you're being asked to consider today. The area on the right equates to that area in green on the left. So you can see this is the first phase of a bigger development. If this proposal is successful this morning, future phases will follow quickly because the applicant is keen to build this scheme out, which is important in terms of delivery, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. So just to reinforce, the pale green on the left is the area that we're looking at this morning. The details are shown on the right. We will go into a bit more detail in terms of what that layout shows. Here's the site. If we superimpose the reserve matters onto that, the area I would like you to take a little bit of time to look at is, as you go up Meadow Lane, which is the road that runs north-south, you'll see a cluster of existing properties. Now, we've been very careful to ensure that the reserve matters before you have little or no effect on the residential amenity of those properties, and I will explain why in a moment. So, at the southern end of the site, because I can't fit all of the development on one slide, we'll do it in two halves. Each of those properties has an elevation that looks towards the road. Where we have what ordinarily might be a blank flank end elevation, the developer has provided elevations to that, so it isn't a blank flank. And overlooking this little area of green, we are going to secure additional elevational changes. So in terms of interest, there are no blank flanks looking out onto public space. We followed the same principle with the northern end of this layout. In terms of the estate layout, you remember that access was agreed at outline stage. We have 2 points of access. The principal street in the dark blue, which will also serve the new primary school. We have a secondary access, which is the lighter blue. Suffolk County Council's Highway Authority were perfectly happy with this arrangement. Ultimately, the dark blue and the light blue will link up in a loop, serving the whole estate. In terms of connectivity, what I've highlighted on the left are areas where we have speed tables. And if you look at the area B on the right, what we've done is introduce a pedestrian-friendly connection from within the estate through to the new primary school, and that does cross a speed table. So what we've been trying to do is reinforce safe routes to school with our colleagues at Suffolk County Council. Again, that shows in greater detail the connectivity. So you can easily get into the countryside with at least 3 connections to Meadow Lane. They're pedestrian connections. We don't have any vehicular connections to Meadow Lane. We have footpath connections along the frontage of the site. And as you can see from the report, we have secured from Linden Homes an additional £65,000 to provide footway on the southern side of Norton Road in front of the Victoria Public House. That now means anyone within the village can walk to the primary school on a footway, which at the moment you can't always do. And the 106 that has already been secured provides for a pedestrian crossing. On there, I've shown its position illustratively with a pink arrow. So in terms of safe routes to school, this site, through the details, will deliver a safe route to the new primary school from day one, which we think is a significant benefit. In terms of storey heights, and you'll notice that the Parish Council were concerned about the 2.5 storey, but let's look in more detail. So everything in red is 2-storey. Everything in blue is bungalow. And you recall earlier I asked you to note the cluster of houses, the existing houses on Meadow Lane. Each of those is opposite an existing property, so there is nothing above bungalow height where there is any relationship to existing dwellings. We feel that that is an excellent way to harmonise new and existing in terms of residential amenity. What I didn't demonstrate there is obviously the grey area, the crescent, and there's one property on the frontage, is 2.5 storey. Now, we often have debates at committee, what does 2.5 storey mean? Is it really 3 storeys disguised as something else? What does it actually mean? Well, I'll show you in a little bit more detail, because I'm convinced that the 2+ attic storeys will not stand out within this development in terms of the scale and mass. In terms of parking, the dominant feature, the centrepiece, is the crescent. That has its own parking on a hard surface. We have had a comment from Suffolk County Council in terms of some of the parking space within the secondary street. Every blue dot on the right is a parking space. The majority are all within residential curtilages. But what we have tried here is something a little bit different. It works, I've seen it work in other parts of East Anglia within new estates, and it works well. You'll notice that on this extract there are 2 spaces in a little lay-by within the street. And what that actually does is, rather than have the 2.25 for visitors on plot, what we've actually done is pull out the visitor space and put it on the highway so it's available for any visitor. And that way you have a much more efficient use of visitor spaces, because they're not conveyed to individual properties. So there are more visitor spaces available to more people. Each of those has at least 2 on-site parking spaces. Some have garages. You'll notice that the parish council were a little bit concerned that not every plot had a garage, but as I say in the report, your standards do not require a garage on every plot. It simply requires parking spaces. So we're perfectly satisfied with that arrangement. I think the County Council is a little bit nervous about the idea of having parking on the street in a lay-by. But in many ways that's a better use of the space, because it isn't obstructing traffic that wishes to use the road. If we actually had parking on the street without the lay-by, that reduces the width of the carriageway. This doesn't reduce the width of the carriageway. In terms of the parish council's comments, they were concerned that the development might not reflect the character of properties within the village. So what I've done is taken a series of pictures of estates in the immediate vicinity. Obviously, there is nothing in this estate that will look like the old traditional properties that you find in Thurston, but the majority of the properties around it are modern. So here we have clover fields. There's the pub. The other side of Norton Road, in some ways this is one of the least attractive. I don't mean to be rude to the occupiers. It's not their fault that the scheme has a close-boarded fence along the entire frontage on the south side and blank elevations. But what we've achieved on the other side, I would say, is superior in terms of urban design. And here we have Sandpit Lane, again, modern properties. So what are we looking at on this site? You remember I was describing how corner turning units have been secured with elevations on flank ends. Here's an example. So the house on the left is what you would see from the main bit of frontage, but the picture on the right is actually the end elevation of that property. So it has a bay window in this example, a blind window, and actually there's an elevation that then runs at 90 degrees along the adjacent street. So that's a fully elevated corner, which is far more interesting than seeing lots of blank walls. And we've got that throughout this phase of development. Again, here's another one where on a corner where you have right-angled development. There are no blank flank end walls, so there's always something of interest to look at. Even the bungalows, we've worked hard with Linden Homes to do something a little bit out of the ordinary, rather than it just be a straight box with a huge roof, a lid. We've actually got some rather elegant bay windows, the porch. It helps to add interest to something that is often an afterthought. In terms of bungalows, very little thought ever goes into design of bungalows. So I'm pleased that Linden Homes have really worked with us to start developing a bungalow style that has something a little special about it. A very ordinary terrace, but look at the detail. We've got the flat brick arches, we've got the porches, we have nicely proportioned casement windows. That is I would say, almost a traditional village style terrace in a modern idiom. So we're very pleased with that. And again, look at those, there's always a bit of interest. There's some crippled eaves. We've got bay windows, again the detail, we have window reveals, external glazing bars. We've also encouraged Linden to use a range of materials that include clay tiles, the artificial slate of the ones that you have recently seen on other estates that you like, not the concrete nasties. And again, this is another estate where we can say the design bar is being raised from the average that perhaps we see across East Anglia. In terms of the crescent, I think the parish council are a little concerned, well, they may be significantly concerned, I don't want to underestimate their concern, that this is an urban feature, and in some ways they are entirely right. But what we have here is a significant estate. It isn't any longer, or it won't be, rural area, and this actually forms the centrepiece. And I think when you look at the following slides, I'm hoping that you'll feel it's a rather attractive composition. It isn't Bath, it can't be Bath, but it's the first step we've had at introducing something a little bit different into the townscape. That is not an unattractive arrangement of properties. We've got, on this case, it's simple render, casements, steeply pitched roof. I want you to pay particular attention to the dormer windows, because you'll recall that the parish were concerned that 2-storey plus attic would look out of character. And what we've done is, working with Linden, we have secured much smaller dormers, and I think the parish council were right, because in some ways, because when the scheme first came in, they were much bigger dormer windows. But I think you would have to agree that they sit nicely within the roof. They are minor incidents in the roof. They're no longer massive dormers that sort of make the thing look top heavy. That's a rather elegant composition. What we've also secured, and it's not shown on that slide, is rather than have a single chimney between the properties, we're getting a double stack to make it look far more authentic. So that will be a wider chimney stack with 2 pots. It'll be a false chimney, but it will look, to all intent and purpose, like a fully functioning chimney. There it is in flat 2D form. What you can't really get from that is the effect of the crescent. So what we've done is I've quickly knocked up a model, and then we took a photograph of it. So that's how it might look. But of course, that centrepiece of green will have planting. So let's add some planting. That really begins to look like a rather elegant feature within the centre of this part of the estate. Because it's in the centre, it doesn't necessarily impact the rest of Thurston, but it's its own little hidden gem. So if you have a need to go into the estate, I think that will be quite an attractive feature to pass. In terms of what it might feel like, if we quickly, hopefully nothing happens in terms of the sound as we go through this. So that's quite an elegant feature, and again that centrepiece will be landscaped. Just to emphasise the point of the dormers, on the left we have that original house type with the bigger dormer, and on the right we have the amended. And I think if I just press that, what you see then, if we quickly, you can see the significant difference that had. Now in terms of, is a 2-storey plus attic building any higher than a 2-storey, the answer is there. So on the left we have the Pembroke house type, and on the right we have the Ripley. The ridge height is exactly the same. So whilst I have some sympathy for the parish council in terms of their point of, is a 2.5-storey building out of character, I would have to say physically There is no real difference, and therefore it won't have an adverse impact. Residential amenity, we've already looked at the point in terms of properties in Meadow Lane, but just to reinforce that so you can see them in juxtaposition, there we go. So we're perfectly satisfied. There are no harmful impacts on residential amenity, and on the south we only have the Victoria pub to think about in terms of impact. As a shot down Meadow Lane, the site is on the left. That hedge will remain intact. Now the properties in Meadow Lane. You'll see there is already an established hedgerow along the eastern side of Meadow Lane. The parish council and residents are absolutely keen. It's probably not the right word, but they've asked us to ensure that that hedgerow is protected. And what we've done is we've actually worked with Linden to reinforce it. So rather than just protect it, we are going to beef that hedge up. We've seen the bungalows, but by the time you have that hedge, and that's only at 2 metres high, so assuming it was trimmed, say the farmer went down there with the flail and just took it down to 2 metres, you will see very little of those. But if they're left to just grow naturally, they will soon disappear in terms of the impact on Meadow Lane. All the bin collection points have been carefully worked out. They all satisfy our standards, so every bin can be collected by our teams. There will be no rubbish left uncollected. They're all within the prescribed walking distance of the dust cart. That's the Victoria pub at the bottom of the shot. The site opens up to the north. There it is again. In terms of landscaping, and this is something the parish council were keen to ensure that we got right, is so on the Norton Road frontage we have typical field edge species. So we have that classic mixture of field maple, dogwood, hazel, hawthorn, spindle and blackthorn. And that also extends, well, that's where we're reinforcing the planting, all the way up Meadow Lane. So this is exactly the sort of planting you would expect to see in a rural setting. This will help to maintain the character of the frontage. So again, here's some, being country folk, you will know what they all look like. But in terms of ecology, that provides a fantastic larder for wildlife, and that's something that the parish wanted us to be sure that we achieve, is actually not only to have excellent landscaping, but to ensure that it contributes towards biodiversity. So here's a classic shot of the flowers of a spindle tree. You can see throughout this, the landscapers not only thought about food for wildlife, they thought about seasonal colour, and they've thought about ensuring that it harmonises with a rural setting. Outside of the application site, but just to demonstrate to members that drainage has been properly considered, within the open space at the north of the site is a pond that will receive surface water, and that has the capacity to take abnormal or extraordinary extreme weather events. When it isn't functioning as effectively a balancing pond, it will be part of the public open space. So there is the pond in the top right-hand corner. That's the bit of the estate road that will take in phase 2. So this morning you're also being asked to consider that section of road. We are satisfied that a perfectly acceptable form of townscape can be developed around that highway network. In terms of additional drainage points, the Suffolk County Council's Floods and Water Authority are satisfied with the proposal, but they have asked us to add 3 additional conditions, which we're perfectly satisfied are appropriate. They're dealing with some technical drainage matters. It won't affect the details that you see before you. So all in all, we think this is an excellent scheme. We have suggested that you might want to defer to the head of, or the acting Chief Planning Officer, in order that we can secure a legal agreement to make sure we get the additional 65,000 for highway works. But other than that, we think this is a scheme that we wholeheartedly commend to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive overview of the application. Any questions at this point from members? Yeah, Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if you could confirm the status of Thurston Neighbourhood Plan, because I understand it is not going to referendum until September, therefore it isn't yet made or adopted. And so can you confirm kind of what status we can give that with regards to this application? And also there was mention in the papers about a play area, specifically reference to a junior play area. Could you just explain that, because you hadn't mentioned it in your presentation? Thank you.
I'm grateful to you, Councillor Eburn, because I did say it had been adopted, and you're quite right. It hasn't. What has happened is it has been submitted and therefore carries significant but not absolute dominant weight. So thank you for the correction. We are expecting it to go to referendum later this year, and depending on the outcome of that, we will either have, ultimately, once it's gone to full council, an adopted neighbourhood plan or not. So I apologise to the committee for any misleading I did through that earlier statement. In terms of the play area, that will follow in the second phase. That area to the north of that layout, I wonder if my colleague here could whiz us back to, let's say, slide right at the start. 4, please. Apologies for the, we're just going to quickly flick back. There we are. So within that area of open space on the right-hand side of the green, that is where the play area will be provided. In some ways, you could argue it's unfortunate it's not available in the first phase, but experience has tended to show if you have a junior play area in what is a development site, it tends not to be used for the obvious purpose, that is of obvious reason that people don't think it's necessarily safe for kids to be playing out while there are construction vehicles moving about. So it will happen at the later phases, but it is secured through the Section 106, so it isn't something that will slip through the net or be forgotten.
Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I've got several questions. The first is on slide 17 about the shared surface. There is a shared surface which is more or less on the junction. I'm just a bit concerned that when vehicles might turn into the secondary road, they will be confronted by pedestrians walking on a shared surface. I think we need to make sure that Suffolk County Council are happy with that, because although it's a secondary road, when it's a loop, people are going to use the road that's most convenient.
So, I say that we're straying into debate.
Yeah. So are we? Yeah. The reason that I'm asking the question is: are we sure that County Council are happy with that? And there are a few other comments that the county made. Have they all been taken into account, or is that wrapped up in a condition?
I'm afraid we're going to have to do a little bit of slide jiggling, but Councillor Wellham, you referred to slide 17, so if we can do slide 17. I understand the point you make, absolutely. Now, if I described it as a shared surface, in some ways that is true, but technically that is a raised, I did say raised speed table, it's on the, and that is slightly different, so we can't really zoom in. So you're talking about the area A. Yeah. You'll notice that there are footpaths that take you further into the development. So we're encouraging pedestrians to get into the site to cross. But that is, in some ways, is no different to any other junction, you'll notice that the primary footpath runs along the front. There will be the dropped curb. Pedestrians will be crossing east to west at that junction point. We're not necessarily advocating that pedestrians are crossing the whole way along that surface, but what it does to drivers, because there will be a ramp at either end, is say to them, because you're now hitting this ramp, you are going through a residential area, we want you to slow down. So it certainly does provide a crossing point adjacent to the primary school, and in some ways that is where pedestrians will be crossing, and that's where they're being encouraged to cross, but it's much further into the estate. So Suffolk County Council are absolutely happy with the arrangement. They helped negotiate that geometry, that detail, so I can absolutely confirm they're happy. In terms of their other comments, the only outstanding issue they have is with the laybys, as I explained. In all other respects, they are satisfied.
Do you have another question?
Sorry, I've got 2 or 3 others. Yeah, the next one is about the balancing pond. Do we know what the arrangements for maintenance are? And is the Internal Drainage Board aware of it? Because there may be a commuted sum payable to the Internal Drainage Board. So are they aware?
The actual pond is outside of the reserve matters that you're looking at this morning. What I've done is put it in there to demonstrate that we haven't forgotten the whole issue of drainage. Ultimately, all of that will be sorted out in terms of the adoption, and that's down to Suffolk County Council and others. That will all be resolved, and I'm sure you will get those details in the next phase. So that will be dealt with.
My last one is very simple. Did you say it's a pelican crossing or a zebra crossing of the road at the front of the site?
I left that open. I didn't say one or the other. That is down to Suffolk County Council's Highway Authority. You might suggest that, in your view, something that you can activate would be preferable to something that you rely on a driver stopping. So you might prefer a pelican to a zebra. You're perfectly able as a committee to ask the county to consider that when they are thinking about the type of crossing they will be installing. But it isn't a matter for this committee or this application, but perfectly understandable comment.
Thank you for those. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor.
Suffolk County Constabulary raised several comments regarding security. Can you confirm that these were taken into account in the current plan?
Yes. In terms of the conditions, there are some conditions where we've required the height of walls to be raised, but generally speaking, we are very satisfied that this is a safe, in terms of designing out crime, estate. Some of the comments made by the police we've acted on and secured amendments, so we're now satisfied that it ticks the right boxes in terms of security.
Okay, thank you very much. No more questions, so we'll move on to the speakers from the public and from the Parish Council. So first up is Victoria Wapples from the Parish Council. If you'd like to come up, and we have a timer here, and if you can keep to 3 minutes, please.
Firstly, the Parish Council notes and is pleased to accept that the layout before the committee is a vast improvement on that which was first submitted, and thanks planning officers and Linden Homes for their commitment to negotiation. In principle, the Parish Council does support this application. It does, however, have some concerns that it would like to voice. Individual councillors and myself as clerk visited sites in Thaxted, Saffron Walden, Royston, Malden and Braintree. I've spoken extensively to my colleague clerks at both Thaxted and Saffron Walden, and it has to be noted that those designs were all off towns, and whilst the design, layout and materials might be best suited to a town, they may not be best suited to a site that sits on the edge of a rural village. We are concerned at the 2.5-storey dwellings. However, we would like to say that whilst we might have to accept those in the crescent, which have had the dormers remodelled to ensure that the profile of the roof is more in keeping with the remainder of the dwellings, it is sincerely hoped that these will not be replicated within the remainder of the site coming forward under further reserved matters, as we do not feel their design is compatible with the actual location of this site. The PC does take issue that Linden Homes and your own planning officers have not sought to consider ensuring all properties are built to the nationally described space standards and not just those of affordable rent tenure. And it is noted under section of the report, section 70, that not all meet this standard in the affordable housing. Connectivity, the Parish Council recognises and is appreciative that Linden Homes has offered an additional contribution, thereby increasing the connectivity to and from the site, as well as within the site and access to the primary school. However, given that most accessing the primary school and preschool will be from the south, it does take issue that a zebra crossing is to be sited on Norton Road, and would have liked to have seen this upgraded to a pedestrian-like controlled crossing, which will ensure that motorists approach the area with care, with the intention of stopping should it become necessary. Whilst noting that this phase does not provide play provision and there is a desire to enhance design quality in its open spaces, it should be noted that the PC is expecting a future provision of play provision to complement and enhance existing provision within the village and meet any known deficits. Therefore, there is a real expectation that Linden Homes will actively engage with the Parish Council prior to the submission of reserved matters for other sections of this site. There is a need for adventure-style provision attractive to juniors and other children which will complement and enhance the wooded areas of this site. The Parish Council is very pleased to see that the hedgerow along Meadow Lane is being maintained and will enhance the area. And finally, with regards to site-specific construction management scheme, this does require careful consideration given the development to the south of Norton Road and to the west of Norton Road, all are due to commence at the same time. There will be a plethora of construction vehicles within the village. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, do you have any questions at all for the Parish Council at this stage? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask how this fits with your neighbourhood plan, please?
Sorry, how?
How does this site fit within your neighbourhood plan?
Overall, yes, we are. I mean, obviously, it is outside our built-up area boundary, but our neighbourhood plan has now withdrawn its boundary. This does sit within, and this phase does we are happy that this phase, apart from 2.5-storey dwellings, does conform.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up, we have Lydia Voyas, who's the applicant or agent. And again, if you can keep to the 3 minutes, please.
I've just got the applicant here with me if you have any questions that I'm unable to answer. Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Lydia Voyas from Savills, agent to Linden Homes. We support the officer's recommendation for approval for the reserve matters for the first phase of residential development at land north of Norton Road, Thurston. Linden Homes is a national house builder with a focus on delivering well-designed and sustainable new homes. Their achievements have been recognised through receipt of numerous awards, including silver in What House Awards Sustainable Developer category in 2016. Linden Homes is keen to bring forward new homes within Mid-Suffolk. As explained by your officer, the principle of residential development, including the number of dwellings at the site, were established through the outlined planning permission. The matters for your consideration are appearance, scale, layout and landscaping. The design principles of the reserve matters submission positively respond to the opportunities of the site. Full consideration is given to the integration of the site with the new primary school, the village of Thurston, whilst achieving sustainable benefits for new and existing residents. Whilst access is not a matter for consideration at this stage, it should be noted that approval of this first reserve matters submission will enable the timely construction of both the access to serve the residential development and the new primary school, which is approved as part of the outline consent. Linden Homes has agreed to provide an additional financial contribution of £65,000 to Suffolk County Council to assist in the provision of a new public footway linking Thurston to the new primary school. The first phase of residential development will bring forward 87 new homes in a mix of sizes ranging from 1-bed to 5-bedroom properties, including 30 affordable homes, which is 35% affordable policy compliant. The scheme incorporates 11 bungalows along the western edge of the site. The mix of housing proposed reflects the accommodation needs of different people and age groups to achieve a mixed, balanced and cohesive community. The applicant has worked closely with the local planning authority and technical consultees as part of pre-application discussions and throughout the course of the application to respond to comments received. As it is acknowledged that the Parish Council raised concerns about various aspects of the proposals, which your planning officer has responded to in detail within the report to committee and the presentation. The plans for approval reflect the Council's policy requirements, and it has been acknowledged by your officer that Linden Homes has taken the opportunity to promote a higher quality development. The majority of the hedgerows and trees will be retained, and additional planting is proposed throughout the site. 2 areas of public open space are incorporated into this first phase of development. Linden Homes has designed the specification of the new homes to achieve high levels of fabric energy efficiency and is also proposing the provision of electric vehicular charging points within garages.
I'm afraid the 3 minutes is up, so it'll have to be the last sentence, please.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Have one final sentence to sum up, but it is one sentence.
Okay, so in addition to the legal agreements and seal payments, we wish that you can support your officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Lots of hands going up. We'll start down this end. Councillor Haddingham.
Could you just clear up, the parish clerk said something about the minimum space standards were not on all the houses. Is that?
Yes, so this isn't a policy requirement within Mid Suffolk, the National Described Space Standards. We have worked with the affordable tenures, so the affordable rent properties will meet that standard. But as set out within the committee report, we've set out a floor space schedule of what the variance is, and we don't think it's significantly different.
Councillor Muller.
You mentioned electrical charging points for vehicles. Is this going to be on every property or just a limited number of properties?
It's within the garage properties only at this stage. Again, this isn't a requirement, but we, Linden Homes, have worked together with the council to secure this.
Thank you. And there was another hand further along. Yeah, Councillor Whelan.
Thank you, Chair. Could you clarify which properties are to be affordable homes and which properties are to have a rendered finish and what palette of colours you're using for the rendering, please?
The submitted plans do identify which properties will be affordable. They're identified with spots on the plans. I don't obviously have them before me to show you.
On page 127 of the papers, slide 11. Is it slide 11 or is it slide 12? Can we just have a put that one up?
It's a little bit difficult to see, but it's on the western edge and also on the eastern edge as well to the south, but they're indicated with the dots on them.
The rendering?
The rendering. Again, this is shown in the illustrative materials plan, so that it's going to be shown, a mixture throughout the site. We haven't specified the specific details at this stage, but we've indicated colour ranges. It's cream and
yeah, it's basically creams and whites.
yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I just ask one quick question? Actually, you've heard the Parish Council talk about the play area and everything. Are you, I mean, that's outside of this phase, really. But I mean, will you be carrying out negotiations going forward?
I've heard loud and clear what the parish have got to say, so we will go and discuss the equipment, and we've had internal discussions about using that woodland and what we can potentially do inside that woodland.
Okay, thank you for the reassurance. Okay, members. So we've had everything. We now move on to the ward members. Now, I've had one ward member comment. Try and just find it. Which I have filed somewhere safe. Just bear with me a sec. It's here, because I just had it in my hands to read out. Councillor Harry Richardson has... We'll have to bring it up on the screen if we can't. I know it's here somewhere. Here it is. Right, so there are two ward members. There's Councillor Harry Richardson and Councillor Wendy Turner. I've just had a comment from Councillor Harry Richardson, which I will read out. Unfortunately, I'm unable to attend in person, so would like to submit the comments below. Whilst I do not object to this reserved matters application on the whole and largely agree with the recommendation made by officers, I'd like to express disappointment about two particular aspects. Firstly, I'm disappointed to see that this application includes 2.5-storey buildings in numerous locations which are not in keeping with the design of the existing dwellings in the northern part of Thurston, which has already been noted by both officers and the parish council. Although these are deemed to be acceptable by officers, I believe these would represent unacceptable deviation from the existing character of the settlement, and hope these can be omitted from the proposed development via condition or by negotiation with officers. Secondly, I recognise the proposed density of the development might represent a distinctively urban layout, and hope that the committee will reinforce officers' recommendations that the subsequent phases of the development are at a lower density to represent the rural characteristics of the surrounding area. Aside from those concerns, I am satisfied with the assurances received by the planning officers in relation to the issues raised by the parish council, so would advocate for approval of this application along with necessary conditions. So that's from Councillor Harry Richardson. So, members, that's all the information provided to us. We've had a full presentation. We've heard from the parish council and we've heard from the applicant and one of the ward members. So, over to you to discuss, debate, and we need to reach a conclusion. Yes, Councillor Muller.
Chair. Is it possible, where there seems to be some obviously criticism of the actual 2.5-storey, they could have like the windows flat within the roof, like you often see, so you've still got a room in the roof, but instead of having like the extra bit on the top, it's flush with the actual roof at all? Could that make? Yeah.
What I'll do is let's just get clarity on what we can and can't change, and just so we have clarity about, because straying into, we all may have very different personal views, and we go round and round in circles. So let's just have clarity on what we can or can't comment on.
So we need to look at what's in front of us. If there are reasons that you would consider refusal, but there are things that we could go away and amend rather than outright refuse, perhaps, that might be an area we could look at. Yes, potentially changing windows, changing various things on these properties is an option, but if that is something that would be reason to refuse or be out of character rather than a personal preference or design is always very subjective and is something that we have struggled with at appeal before, and probably just advise a note of caution on that unless the committee felt particularly strongly that that would be absolutely out of character, and then perhaps whether we would have authority to go away and review that would be probably what I would suggest.
Thank you for that clarity. Thank you for that. Well, no one's starting. Yes, I don't like to go first because I don't want to lead the conversation. So, Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't made up my mind on this one. I can see that there's been a lot of discussion, and some of the discussion has led to compromise, which is to be commended. I would like to talk a little bit about whether we should have a pelican or whether we should ask for a pelican or a zebra crossing, and I just put these few ideas into people's minds. One of the dangers of a pelican crossing in that location is a pelican crossing makes a noise. Every time somebody presses the button, it goes pip, pip, pip. And I'm not sure that this would be the right location for that. However, if that's what we wanted, then we ought to ask for it to be designed to the standards that help those who are hard of hearing and people who have sight difficulties. And there are ways of doing that with a rotating knob or whatever. So I think we need to be mindful if we're going to ask for a pelican, or we ought to think about how it's going to be used, who can use it, and what the noise is going to be. I'm concerned about the balancing pond. I see we're going to leave that until later. But it's got to be constructed, I guess, as part of phase 1. So we need to make sure that it is going to be well protected and maintained for the whole duration of the construction period of this phase and subsequent phases and away into the future. So those are my two. My other concern, obviously, was the shared surface just inside the junction. But I've understood what the officer has said. I mean, I'm generally happy with the way that the negotiations have gone. Just got those 3 points that I'm still mulling over.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure which way to go on this one at the moment. I've got several concerns with regards to this overall. The urban feel I've got a concern about in the village of Thurston's a growing village. And I'm just wondering whether greater emphasis on the landscaping, particularly with native planting, might help that. I'm not sure that the conditions actually kind of give us enough confidence in that. Also, I've got a concern about the space standards. I think we should be conforming to national standards on that, and I think this site should. And there's also the concerns, I note from the questioning earlier, I also had a point about the safety issues that the police have raised, and with regards to kind of the design of parking and so on. And again, I'm not sure that that's met within the conditions. And finally, the last condition relates to having external electrical connection. So if that can be for vehicle charging as well, because there aren't that many garages. So that if, by the time this is built out, there's going to be a lot of electric cars, and I think we need to kind of be considering that. Thank you.
I think that's what that condition means, but we'll just get clarity on that. Regarding space standards, can we just have clarity about what is within the Mid-Suffolk remit on that?
Currently, you do not have a policy that requires any internal space standard. Now, as development management officers, we have made representation to our policy colleagues that we have an ideal opportunity to incorporate them into the new local plan. The government advocates that that is the place to put your space standards. So what we try and do is we try and encourage developers to meet the national standards, but we cannot require them to do so. And on this occasion, we are fortunate insofar as Linden Homes have ensured that the affordable housing does meet the standard. But you're quite right, not all of the open market units will meet the nationally described space standards. There isn't anything we can do in terms of having a policy to force them to do that.
Do you want to come back just on that point before we move on to the next one?
If I could just come back on that point, my understanding is in the emerging joint local plan we have got something about space standards in that, but so I think that we should be kind of pushing for that as much as possible.
I can assure Councillor Eburn that as officers we are pushing, but currently, if a developer says, and what weight can the planning authority give the emerging local plan, we have to say very limited. However, as it progresses, hopefully, if that element is adopted, we're in a much stronger position. But in terms of some of the other points you've you've raised. We have added that condition on external connection points for the very reason that you have highlighted. There are very few garages, so it's not much of an offer to say that we'll have them in the garages when the majority of the plots don't have a garage. So we're requiring at least some sort of external point, electrical connection, so that were somebody to buy an electric vehicle, they wouldn't then have to start thinking about running the juice around the side of the building to a point. And we think that is important. I would accept your point. In terms of an urban feel, having an outline planning permission approved for up to 200 dwellings almost certainly means that it will not have the character of a traditional village. For that to happen, it would have to be at densities much lower than the government would ever advocate. So unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to see something you would say was characteristically village feel. But what we can do is ensure that the house types have references to rural elements and the materials, which we've tried to do in this occasion. We have secured amendments within the layout to satisfy the concerns expressed by the police, and we have additional conditions to ensure that they are delivered. In terms of Councillor Wellham's point, I don't see why there couldn't be discussion between members and the County Council in terms of the crossing. As I said before, it's not something we can deal with here, but I understand all the points you're making. I'm quite happy to make representations to our colleagues at Suffolk County that it may be if you have a particular interest in that, we can, certainly the ward members, we can have, and the parish council, we can have discussion around what is the best solution. I think they would be keen to be involved in that. I think that's all I would say in terms of your points, Councillor William, because we've tackled the others, I think, so that's my response. Thank you, Chair.
You. Yep, I'll go. You go next. Councillor Hadding, I'll go after you.
I think my only worry is the space standards, but as we haven't actually got one of our own policies to cover that, you know, I think it's a very good, you know, they've really improved the overall plan. They've listened to people, they've engaged with the village and the parish council. I think, you know, I'm usually, you know, thinking a lot of these signs are ugly, but I think they've done well. You know, although I recognise that the parish council has concerns about the dormer windows, I actually think that's a better look than sort of a skylight or a Velux window. And I'm happy to go with the officer's recommendation that to approve this.
Thank you. Are you looking to propose that?
Yes.
Thank you for that. I'll go next, then, because you've already been, if I may, and then bring you back in. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, I mean, well done to the Parish Council and Linden Homes, because clearly you've got together and achieved a lot with officers in bringing it forward, but it's just from the Parish Council's perspective, just not quite over the edge yet. But it's very close, it feels like, and it fits within the neighbourhood plan. So, you know, it ticks so many of the boxes that we often don't see ticked, actually, here. So I think that's fantastic. If we could just overcome the 2.5-storey, which is clearly one of the remaining hurdles, but I think what's before us is such a marked improvement. I don't think we can turn it, from my perspective, I don't think I could vote against it just on the 2.5-storey. But what I would say is the applicants here, and the message is loud and clear for the next phase. So I think if you can please have more discussions, ongoing discussions through the next phase with the Parish Council, and hopefully try and take account of what's being said. But I can't find a reason to refuse it, but it's not 100% perfect, is where I sit. Councillor Muller.
I must admit, I must concur with Councillor Haddingham and Councillor Hicks. I am impressed with the amount of work that's been going on between the Planning Authority, the Parish Council and Linden Homes. I think that's really good and should encourage that to go on in the future. I'm particularly impressed with some of the things that have been taken place with making sure the roads are particularly safe. You've got the footpath going to the proposed primary school. The fact you've actually got bungalows, I hear a lot of reports of people saying there's not enough bungalows for people. Also, one beds in the affordable housing. People may want to downsize. I think that's a very positive move. And in view of that, I would like to second the proposal for approval. Thank you.
Councillor Norris, you've heard.
Yes, thank you. On balance, I'm inclined to support the recommendation. I just do have one question, actually, for the officer, if I may. On the layout, on the site layout on slide 11, there's a lot of the access roads are shown as shared surfaces. Are these surfaces suitable for access by emergency vehicles in the case of like a fire or whatever? Thank you.
Yes, they are.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I was just thinking if we're moving towards a decision, can we just make sure on the conditions that where it's got ecological enhancement details, can just someone explain what that's going to cover? Because it's a little bit woolly to me, and I think we want to make sure we've got native planting in there, that there's sufficient landscaping to try to, as I said before, to, you know, bring an urban feel more towards a village type feel. Someone just qualify that, please. Thank you.
I have to apologise again to Councillor Eburn insofar as this application is accompanied by a raft of supporting documents which includes an ecological strategy. What I've done for the purpose of this report is shorthand to say, provided they implement everything in that strategy, we are satisfied. And I can say that with certainty because the advice from Place Services, our consultants in terms of ecology, they are perfectly happy with all the measures that are being proposed. It's simply that I didn't set them all down in the report. So that even goes down to things like hedgehog openings in all the fences between properties. So there is a whole raft. What we're saying by that condition, you must now implement the scheme in accordance with that supporting document. That's how we secure there are native species. That's how we ensure that the bird boxes, the hedgehog bits are all in there. So we are satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Willam.
Thank you, Chair. Just one small concern which I think you can take into account when you're having the discussions about the landscaping, and that is there are a lot of very small areas of grassed areas which will come into some sort of maintenance agreement. I'm just a little bit worried that they are such small areas and there's so many of them that they will be difficult to maintain. If there is a way of making sure that there's got to be a purpose to all these little tiny bits of grass. If there is no purpose for them, please don't put lots and lots of little bits of grass in because you can't think of anything else to do with it. That's a plea to the developer as much as to the officers.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to go to a vote. It's been proposed by Councillor Haddingham and seconded by Councillor Muller. As per the recommendation on page 115 and 116 of our papers, those are the latest version of the recommendation. With the conditions mentioned, can you just run through the extra conditions for us, just so we're 100% clear?
Three conditions from Suffolk County Council, floods and water, that I had on the penultimate slide of the...
Yeah. It's all from the floods team. So all those in favour of the recommendation as laid out, can we have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 7C in the agenda, which is application number DH19015554, which is outline planning permission in Badwell Ash. And Councillor Mayor would sit on the other side of the room for this and be able to comment but not vote.
Yes.
Okay, over to Alex Scott to present.
Thank you, Chairman. This is item 7C in the papers, application reference DC 19015554. It's land off Hunston Road, Badwell Ash. It's an outline application with all matters reserved, save for access, the erection of 52 dwellings, including 18 affordable dwellings, and the creation of a new estate access to Hunston Road. The application follows prior application reference DC 1800465 for a similar development, which was refused by Committee B in November of 2018 for the reasons set out in Part 1 of your papers. And this current application seeks to overcome these prior reasons given for refusal. So to the presentation. This is a general site location in the immediate area. We can see, where's the point?
I don't know.
I just wanted to outline the... well, that will do. Okay, thank you. Yeah, just for the towns for reference here, Bury St Edmunds, Stowe Market, and up to Diss there. This is a aerial map of the wider area. So we have the village of Badwell Ash in this location, and the proposal site outlined in red. And this is a close-up aerial view again. This is the site location plan. And, excuse me, onto some constraints. The existing settlement boundary in the development plan is outlined here in purple. And the colour coding indicates a primary village, which is the second order village. It has quite a few services and facilities, as I've outlined in the report, but not the maximum which are enjoyed by our key service centres. The public footpath, the formal route commences here on Hunston Road and continues adjacent to the northwest of the site and emerging onto the Southern Road in that location. And part of the application is to redefine this formal route. The initial point is rather overgrown, and there are more informal, haphazard routes used by members of the public, which wander all over the applicant's site. To redefine that formal route is a benefit of the proposal as viewed. And on this slide we can also see the flood zones, the Environment Agency flood zones 2 and 3 to the south of the site here. And as we can see, the application site lies outside of those zones. So on to more constraints, and the black hatched area indicates potentially contaminated land with reference to the site's previous use for gravel extraction. And as referred to in the report, a comprehensive land contamination assessment has been submitted with the application, and that has been assessed by your environmental protection officers who are satisfied that future occupants would not be in any danger from sources of land contamination. This is the existing topographical survey of the existing site, and the contours denote that the highest point of a site would be in this location, in the northeast corner, and it also highlights the surveyed trees in green, and the location of the existing lake within the centre of the site here. This is the indicative block plan. It should be pointed out that this is indicative at this stage, save for the access point, which is located here onto Hunston Road, and that is adjacent to the site of the formalised route of the public right-of-way. Now, the location for the access has been selected as the point which will maximise visibility. So we have the road curving away in this location, and then again in this location maximises visibility in both locations, which would be more restricted if it were further down here as you get to about that point. So that's the general reason for the selection of the access point. The existing vegetation, trees, have been retained in this location and here. And an area of public open space and a wildlife pond are proposed between the houses and the Hunston Road frontage. The speed limit of the highway to the frontage is 30 miles an hour, just to confirm that, and that commences just off the page at the junction as you head into the village along Hunston Road from the east. A large amount of landscaping and tree planting is also proposed to the existing open areas to the south and northeast, and a large attenuation pond to deal with surface water drainage is proposed, and please note that is separate to the existing lake, which would be adjacent to the south of that. This is the detail of the proposed estate road access, showing visibility displays, which have been accepted by the County Highways Authority as being safe. And the yellow areas denote proposed paved footpaths away from the metalled carriageway, with the ability to connect into the existing paved footpath network of the village along the area of the visibility displays, which should remain clear in this location. Next, we have the proposed surface water drainage plan to the attenuation basin, so it will link in through the proposed access roads to the attenuation basin in this location. And this has been assessed by the local lead flood authority at the County Council as having capacity for abnormal or extraordinary storm level events, and they've proposed additional conditions to ensure surface water drainage is dealt with in an appropriate manner. These plans show the existing trees, and proposed method of protection, which has been assessed and generally approved by your tree officer, your arboricultural officer. Please note the majority of existing trees and hedgerows are proposed to be retained, and those which are proposed to be removed, in particular alongside Hunston Road, are of low quality. So that is viewed as acceptable. Now, this is a comparison plan. On the right here, we have the plan which was initially proposed and rejected as part of the previous application, and the current proposal for comparison. The layout was previously more open to the south and east boundaries, and this has been addressed, your officers consider, by increased landscape screening to these boundaries. The existing green wooden areas fronting Hunston Road in this location.
Sorry, can you just show that again?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So particularly in this location and along here. So the existing are proposed to be retained. Any development has been moved away from the Hunston Road highway frontage, preserving much of the green character area, and we think improving conditions for ecology, particularly toads, which is in response to previous concerns raised at that time. To the east, more land has been allocated for the attenuation basin coming around the corner here above the existing lake. And this has enabled further pushback of dwellings towards the attenuation basin, giving more room to the highway frontage. Onto some photographs. This is for the northeast corner of the site from the village, and we have Hunston Road here, moving away to the south, away from the village. This is an interior of the site, looking back towards that corner, and the existing wooded area, group of trees to that corner, now proposed to be retained. I'm now turning the camera away, looking out over the site. The existing lake here for reference, and the attenuation basin would be adjacent in this location here. And looking at right from that previous shot, and then right again towards the existing tree coverage fronting Hunston Road. And the proposed access point would be in approximately this location, which is also in the location of the formalised public right-of-way route, which would connect into be more formalised in this location. And you can probably just make out the informal routes which are trodden by members of the public. This is the point of the existing access. No, sorry, the existing public right-of-way and proposed access, and you might be able to make out the public right-of-way sign. And just looking around right, as mentioned before, overgrown. That will be improved. And this is from the far southwest corner of the site, so a location of the right-of-way. This is the existing lake, looking up towards the existing tree screening to the north there. And looking back towards the highway frontage, proposed access point and public right-of-way in that location. And then turning away, looking out to the south, away from the south boundary of the site. And finally, a view from Westley Way, approaching the village from the southeast. And for reference again, this is the existing lake, so the development would be set pretty much behind that. So you have the existing screening here, but that would be improved with the existing landscape proposal, which we'd look to secure under reserve matters. And you'd have the proposed attenuation basin in approximately this location. So adding a bit of an additional landscape feature in that way. In terms of updates, there is a revised comment from our landscape consultants at Place Services, and that is included within the tabled papers. And that proposes additional conditions which your officers would ask is included, should you be minded to approve. So that concludes the presentation as set out within the papers. Officer recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? I've got one. Could we just talk about, out of the 52, at this stage, should we be talking about any that are, do we have to commit to any that are affordable?
Yes, that's part of discussions which have already commenced in terms of the Section 106, and we'd look to secure 35%, which are 18 affordable dwellings in total.
So would that not normally be at this stage that it would be in the recommendation, 52 of which 18 are affordable, or is that just a given?
Gemma?
Is there It's on page 225. It's sort of in advance of the conditions. It just goes back over the page. So we've got the 106 to secure the on-site delivery of 35% and then the difference.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Haddingham.
There's 2 points really, Alex. One, you say that redefining the public footpath would be a benefit. Surely they have to keep that clear anyway, just as a matter of, if you have a public footpath across your land, it's your duty surely to keep it clear and keep all the brambles away. Isn't that right?
Well, I don't want to comment too much on the duties under the public right-of-way because I'm not in a position to make comment on that. But yeah, the point is that is overgrown, and the preference by members of the public to establish their own desire lines through the site, but that is on private land.
And my other point is there's 2 new sort of wildlife ponds on the new plans. Who is going to maintain and sort of take ownership of them?
Well, that's something we would look to negotiate and secure under the Section 106. It would be a nominated body. That could be us as district council. It could be the parish council. It could be a management company. That hasn't been secured yet, but someone will manage it.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the connectivity to the village itself. There's was mention of there not being a footpath, and how the public right-of-way obviously stops at the access point and goes out of the site away from the village. So will there be a footpath or a connection into the village itself of Hunterston, please?
So we go back to the highway slide. We have paved footpaths here adjacent to the metalled carriageway. There's also an area of that must be kept clear for highways visibility displays adjacent to that, and there is a potential that or greater potential than exists at present, that one would be able to walk into the village, and the paved footpath network begins here. That improves the situation we would suggest, whereas it is more overgrown, and offer better connections to the start of the public right-of-way, which at present you would have to walk down the metal part of a carriageway, which is not ideal or safe. Again, we would suggest.
Sorry, can I come back on that? I'm not quite clear. Is there definitely a paved area of footpath going from the access into the site, into the village? Is that going to be part of this?
Well, there would be a paved area up to so far, but not all the way into the village. It would be, but the ability is there to walk.
Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Whelan.
Could I follow on that question, and that is, there would be a paved area so far. Does that mean just the yellow area, or is there, and if that is the case, how far is it then from the, this is on slide 10, the footpath on the, sorry, the footway that's shown in yellow on slide 10, how far is it from there to a paved footway into the village and to the village facility?
Right, so the proposal is for a paved footway, at least gets people round the corner, and then you would have an area, a clear area, which is required to be kept clear by the Highway Authority, which doubles as visibility displays. And there would be the ability to walk clear of the public highway and link into the existing paved network, which begins here, and that is just adjacent to this unmade access road to the rear of the existing dwellings in this location, and where the waste and recycling bins are, I think, in this location here. So I'm not sure of the exact distance, but it's yes, it's not too far. It's not too far.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Whelan?
Well, I think you were talking about using the visibility splay as a place to walk on, which visibility splay starts as 2.4 metres wide and tapers down to nothing. There isn't any other provision. It's just what I want to make sure that there is no other provision. Just one other query. Slides 3, 4, 5 and 6 and 7 have a red line area on them, but I think that red line is different from the red line area which we are of the site which we're now considering. The comparison is actually on slide 13. I think the red line areas are different, which is to be expected because the site area is different. But I think that the earlier slides have got the, if I can call it, the old red line rather than the now proposed red line. Am I right or am I confused?
Can I just give you 30 seconds?
You're right. Switch off.
Yeah, no problem. I think what's happened is the plotting has been taken from the previous applications. So Councillor Wellham is entirely correct that the first few slides do show the previous red line site plan. They are our plans that we have produced, not those from the applicant. And if we go to slide 13, which is page 239 in the bundle, we have got on the right-hand side the previous refused application, and on the left-hand side the current application, which is the red line site plan the applicants have submitted. So yes, there is a degree of variation, but we are looking at the one on the left-hand side of slide 13, page 239. Does that help?
Thank you for that clarity. Okay, we'll move, unless there are any other questions, we'll move on. So, we don't have anyone from the Parish Council, we don't have an objector, we don't have a supporter, but we do have an agent for the application. James Tanner, if you'd like to come up, and you have 3 minutes, please.
Good morning, Mr Chairman and Councillors. My name is James Tanner from Hollands Architects, and I'm the agent acting on behalf of the landowner. I thank the planning officer for a clear description, and I would like to highlight some additional key points in support of the application. The site forms part of a former sand and gravel quarry, which was subsequently backfilled, and therefore the land cannot be returned to its original state prior to this use. As you have heard, the current application is a resubmission of a scheme refused in 2018 at committee, which also had officer recommendation for approval. The main refusal reasons were settlement pattern and landscape, concerns about impact on ecology, and again, some concerns over pedestrian and highway safety. In terms of the resubmission, we've sought to address this by a proposed development area which retains more of the existing tree belt, additional tree planting to the north and eastern boundaries, providing more screening, as Alex has shown, the creation of additional wildlife ponds to provide new habitats for the local toad population, the introduction of additional bat and bird boxes, and I think there's a bit of confusion because we'd envisaged a footpath along the section to Huntston Road to connect to the main village's footpath network, so I think there may be a bit of confusion there. As a result, there are no objections from the main consultees. I'd like to come back to the ecology because it's a key part of the revised scheme. The creation of 2 new wildlife ponds means we can encourage the toad population that hibernate in the areas fronting Huntston Road to colonise the new ponds, reducing their need to cross the road to return to their original breeding ponds. There is an opportunity to strengthen, protect and enhance the quality of the local colony. Indeed, this is reflected in the Place Services Ecological Consultee response, which states that impacts will be minimised such that the proposal is acceptable, and goes on to say that in terms of measurable net gain for biodiversity, the enhancements proposed will contribute to this aim. And I have to say, it's not often I work with a scheme that in ecological impact terms, we do have a potential for a bit of net gain. We did try to engage with the parish council, but it was clear from an early stage that they were not supportive of the application. And I think it's in part driven by a core group of locals who unofficially roam the privately owned land with pets far from the defined footpaths and do not wish this to change. I would also point out that there is a balance of some 32 letters in support of the application. I would like also to point out that the site is relatively straightforward with no complex access or ownership issues that would affect deliverability. The applicant is committed to bringing the site forward, and there is recorded interest expressed from a developer who would be keen to commence works on site as soon as is practical. So, in accordance with the revised MPPF's commitment to identifying sites which are deliverable, and given the local planning authority's current housing supply position, the proposal represents, in my mind, an excellent opportunity to make a significant and positive contribution to the district's housing targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Spot on 3 minutes. Do we have any questions at this point? Councillor Wellham, and then Councillor Eben.
Thank you, Chair. Could you clarify what you said about the footpath connection? You said it very quickly. I can understand you've got to get everything in 3 minutes. But could you clarify that with the aid of perhaps a slide?
Yeah, I think, Alex, if you could bring up the main, not that one, the actual sort of site. Yeah, back one, yeah. We had envisaged from the access that there would be a section of footpath to link back towards, across the front there. It's sort of shown on this drawing if you blow it up a bit, but perhaps it wasn't put in the other engineer's drawing because that concentrated more on the access. So I think we had envisaged that there would be a more formalised section of footpath to connect to the village services, but maybe that's something that we would still need to go back and just clarify with the County Highway Authority. Maybe it's just lost in communication.
So could I just clarify, so from your access to the end of the red line on there, where there's a track,
back that way,
you would
stop about there. Yeah,
you would construct a paved footway.
That's what we had in mind. Yes,
we could, if we wanted to, when we get to that point, we could condition that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Councillor Eben.
Thank you, Chair, but my question was about the footpath as well, so thanks.
Okay, any other questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
So we now move on to the ward member. Councillor Mayor, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here as ward member, but the parish council have asked me to speak on their behalf, and they asked me to emphasise two of their objections. Firstly, the development is considered too large for the village, and secondly, the existing village does not have the infrastructure to cope with the additional 52 houses. I was very interested to hear the officer quote quite a few services. The village has a shop, a pub, and 3 buses to Bury and Diss in one day. That's the sum total, pretty much, of the services. It's true that in the core strategy, the village is listed as a primary village. A primary village, if I might quote that, has basic local services, including a primary school and a shop. The village does not have a primary school. So if it's not a primary village, then it must be a secondary village, which would benefit from small-scale development. If you look at the draft local plan, Badwell Ash is listed as a hinterland village, one of 43 such villages. Those villages, over the next 18 years, have to deliver 1,174 houses. That breaks down to approximately 28 per village, or 2.3%. Badwell Ash currently has planning permission for 120 houses, or just shy of 120 houses, so are already carrying 10% of the total deliverable houses for hinterland villages. If this application is approved, that percentage will rise to 13%. For a village that lacks many of the services required of a primary village, I believe that is too heavy, and that supports the parish council's position. I'd also like to point out sustainability. The officer considers the site to be a sustainable location. It has no school. It has no doctor's surgery. it has extremely limited recreational facilities. I don't believe it is sustainable. And if you look again at the core strategy, sustainability is defined to provide sustainable development and respond to the implication of climate change by reducing Mid-Suffolk's carbon footprint. Every child on every day of their academic career will be bused to various schools. Vast majority of journeys to doctor surgeries will be by car. 3 buses to Bury doesn't give you very much scope, and hence the private car will be a major contributor, and hence I don't believe this is sustainable. The village has and is not against development. It is already carrying more than its fair share. This development pushes that even higher, and I think we should accept these houses would add to that carbon footprint. Badwell Ash is a small village with very limited facilities. This development, I believe, is too large, and hence I support the Parish Council's position. I'd urge you to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I've just got a quick question. Can we just have clarity about its status as a primary or secondary village from someone, please?
It's set out as a primary village. I accept what the councillor is saying about the services there, but they are specifically listed by village rather than by the services they may or may not have. So the assessment would be that it is the primary village.
Can we just, any other questions at all? Yeah, Councillor Haddingham, then Councillor Willam.
Just a quick one. Are the buses every day? Did you say 3 buses a day?
There's 3 buses to Bury, I believe, and 3 to Diss every day.
Right.
Councillor Willam.
Thank you, Chair. You heard what the applicant said, or the architect said, about providing the footpath. Would that footpath then link to the place where children would get on a bus? And if so, or in any case, which schools are they bused to?
I would imagine that the senior school is Thurston Community College. The nearest schools to the village are Walsh and Willows, which is, I believe, currently oversubscribed, Norton, and then with a major new primary school being developed in Stanton around the old middle school site.
So are we certain that the buses would go to those 3? Because normally the bus normally only goes to 1. I wondered if you knew which one that was.
It'll take you to a nearest school, the bus.
Yep. Problem with the nearest school is they may not get in, hence they'll be allocated schools elsewhere.
Any other questions? No, thank you very much. So, members, we've had all the information put before us. We've heard from the officer's presentation, we've heard from the applicant or the agent, and we've heard from the ward member. So for us to now discuss, debate, and come to a conclusion. Councillor Haddingham, you're off first, then Councillor Willam.
Although I'm, always happy to fill up our quota of houses, this one has got me a bit worried. For starters, the whole, buses to school. I mean, we all know if we've got children either at primary or, secondary school, how long are these 3 buses going to last? And it says, and on Sam Harvey's report on page 243, that, like I say, although she doesn't object, she doesn't seem to be very happy about it, saying that the catchment school is, 3.8 miles away, and the secondary school is 6 miles away. The bus stop is 300 metres from the centre of the site, and there's no visitor car parking, which I don't think is very good, frankly. And and there's several things she says that they don't have sufficient sight lines to manoeuvre safely, different sort of sufficient visibility on several plots. Anyway, I'm worried about this thing. That's what I'm saying.
All those matters are reserve matters. Yeah, so we just need to be careful what we're deciding on today.
Chair, thank you. Can I seek some clarification from the officers over where we are with the 5-year land supply? Because are we to give absolutely no weight to the information that we have in terms of the draft figure of 5.32, because I'm trying to see whether or not, in my mind, we're in the same position with this application as we were when we sat at the inquiry for the Woolpit application, because I feel that in my head I've got more confidence over the 5.32 here than I had over the figure that was being quoted at Woolpit. Am I wrong to take that into account?
So the current land supply number is out for consultation, so it could go up or down. So I wouldn't give a significant amount of weight to that land supply figure one way or the other at the moment. What I would say is, following the Woolpit appeal decision and various others that we've had, is they have declared a lot of our policies out of date because of their level of compliance or otherwise, in fact, with the up-to-date MPPF. So the amendments last year and this year to the MPPF, one of the main policies we've got left that does comply with the MPPF is FC 1.1, which talks about sustainable development. So ultimately, regardless of land supply, the boat we're in is looking at, is this sustainable development? Not specifically, we've got a land supply, it's outside the red line, we should say no. We should say we need to look at it in the round in terms of sustainability, looking at both the MPPF and then FC 1.1.
Councillor Norris.
Thank you. I have considerable reservations about this application. We've heard from the ward member that Badwell Ash does not have a great deal of facilities. The comments on page 241 from the parish council, there are a number of points there that give me concern. Planning applications outside the village boundary. The access is of great concern, being on a bend at the brow of a hill, creating a blind spot for existing traffic. And towards their list of their comments, the council has noted the fire and rescue services comments regarding not enough water pressure on the site. And finally, the council has noted the NHS comments that they do not have the capacity to deal with the extra homes. All these sort of negative factors to this application do give me considerable concern. I won't be able to support this in its present form. Thank you.
I just think I need to remind members that you're going to have to give lots of planning reasons as to why if you don't like it, why it's being refused. We can't just say because some of the reasons you've given aren't planning reasons, so we need to be very specific. We need, if that's the route you want to go down, we have to have planning reasons for refusal. But we'll keep going and see where it takes us. Councillor, who was next? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have so many concerns about this because I think that it is absolutely right on the edge of the village boundary, and if their footway is going to be going from the site into the village, and there are, for a village in mid-Suffolk, to me, those are reasonable services, having a shop and having very regular buses into town and buses that take children to school. I mean, that's quite a common factor of most villages in the district. So I've got less of an issue, really, and I think this is an outline we're looking at now. So I think a lot of those things, a lot of the comments that have been made, by the parish council and so on, can probably be addressed. And I would hope that the developers would actually engage fully with the parish council in order to make sure all of their concerns are met. But at the moment, I don't, it seems to be a kind of reasonable development right on the edge of the village, and provided the connectivity is there, and they meet particularly all the ecological concerns that have been raised with the previous application. I'll wait to see what others say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor, go for it. Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have some concerns about this development. Particularly the access into the village, and we really would need to tie this down. The previous plan, which is shown on slide 13, actually shows a very fair pathway looping through the site onto the edge of the existing village, which would be, to my mind, a much better footpath than something on the roadside. I do also note the concerns of people about the sight lines of the access, although the Suffolk County Council don't seem to have picked up on that particularly. But it is on the slight brow as you go over down towards the stream there, and that does present to me a little bit of a concern about sight lines. The Badwell Ash did have a school until, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe that's the reason why it was originally put in as a primary village, but that school closed, and now people are bussed elsewhere. And I believe, actually, that the nearest secondary school to this site would be Ixworth Free School. So, given that the Suffolk County Council is changing things, that there may not be free school bus provision from here to Thurston in the near future. So I have some serious concerns about it. It's on the edge of the village. It doesn't seem to be, we don't have an absolutely kind of set in stone pathway for people to walk or cycle into the village. And it would tend to lend itself to people using the car more and more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Well, I mean, I kind of feel from where I sit, my view is that it came to committee back in November 2018, and the committee sent it away with 3 key points on pages 209 and 210. And actually, the 3 points were about the way the settlement pattern and the character of the site, and they've moved everything back from the road, which is what they were asked to do, and they were asked to take into account those points. They were then asked to look at the ecology and the biodiversity, and obviously they've now talked about bringing in these 2 ponds, and pedestrian safety. So they're talking about building a footpath, and if they don't, we can, I think, whichever direction we head, if it goes towards one way towards approval, we can always put that in as a condition. But they were asked to look at pedestrian safety, and it seems that that has also been picked up on. So the reasons for refusal last time have been addressed. But on the other hand, we've heard from the ward member, who still has concerns, as do the parish council. So sitting on the outside, just on the edge of the village, to me that isn't, that's what we see a lot of applications like that. They have to go round what is the core. As long as there's access to the centre of town, which the footpath hopefully would give, absolutely the car is always a concern. I mean, 3 buses is 3 more than I think the majority of my residents have at all. I have no buses in the majority of my patch ever. So to me, that's actually, that's a good transport link. But so I'm really torn on this one as to which way to go. The applicant has come back and made some real considerations of the points that were raised last time. So I'm probably steering more towards supporting it than not. But I'm still up for discussion and debate. Anyone else? Councillor Wellham.
Chair, I think I'm pretty much where you are. I think with this one, the devil is in the detail, because it is a fairly open site as you look at it from one particular direction. And I think if there is a high quality layout for the housing and high quality landscaping, then this is a site that could be developed. We do need to make sure by condition that there is a footway link to the end of the existing footway. My only concern about that is that if there is a piece of land in between that the applicant does not contain, we might end up with a couple of bits of footway. So is there any way that we can we can be sure that it is possible to link it? Perhaps the applicant knows the answer to that.
we're just having a look at the red line site plan, but they do look to own the land up to the edge of the highway, so we could get the footpath to go through the site all the way to the north of the site and then join onto the highway. So I don't think we would be in a position where you would get to the edge of the site and find you're approaching a wall or a fence, for example. It looks to me like we could secure a footpath through to the edge of the site, albeit that it would probably be beyond our control what happens outside of the red line, but certainly in that red line up to the highway, it looks to me like we could secure it. But Alex, is that fair to your...
Yes, that's certainly my impression. To confirm that, perhaps we could ask the applicant's agent again, just to confirm.
He's just popped out.
So is there a footpath right from where the applicant stand? Is that the rest of the footpath to the village? There is a footpath there, is there? Just across the way, sort of thing.
So if we go to page 2, if we go to slide number 9, so we're talking about having the footpath running along there, then you can see you come to an access track, as it's been called. So there is a gap between the red line and the access track. So are we saying that would be, that's the issue, I guess? It's going to be the issue. How you... Yeah. So on the other side of that track, is there then a pavement all the way into the village?
Yes, there is.
There is. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. Well, having listened to all the comments, etc., and despite the earlier application being refused, I think, efforts have been made to address those issues. So I am mindful to go for approval on this and will be happy to propose approval. Thank you.
With a condition on the footpath running all the way through to the track, so that so there is a clear line, a clear access to the village. Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Eburn?
I think you're looking for a second, aren't you, Chair? Having heard all the comments and so on, I think given particularly that if a committee, refuses an application on particular grounds and then the applicant does come back and address all of those, then I hear the parish council's comments, but we would hope that they would meet. I hope the applicant will meet with the parish council to actually address the comments within the site for the when reserved matters come forward, and so I'll be happy to second it, provided there is the footpath going through to the village. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Welland.
Can I just ask for clarification on the condition which reads timetable for implementation and retention of landscaping, and compare that with what the officer has put in 7.8, which is a comprehensive landscaping strategy. I would wonder whether it would be better to have comprehensive landscaping strategy as a condition rather than just the retention of landscaping.
Well, that comprehensive strategy we would expect as part of reserve matters as landscaping. But if we wanted that highlighted, yeah.
Okay, so it's been proposed by Councillor Muller, seconded by Councillor Eburn, as per the recommendation laid out in the papers on 225 and 226, with the inclusion of a line along the lines of a footpath to be provided from the site to meet the existing access to the village. All those in favour of the recommendation, can we have a show of hands, please? 5. Those against? And abstentions? 1. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll take a quick 10-minute break, start again at 20 to 12 for the next item on the agenda. So we'll move straight on to item 7D on the agenda, which is DC 19017993. And Bradley, over to you to present the application.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Wellham, I'm really sorry. I thought I was the one that was last in, so sorry. You haven't missed anything. We've only read out the number of the application. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen. This application before you being asked to consider a reserve matters proposal for a new warehouse on land at Blackacre Hill, Bamford Road, Great Blakenham. The yellow line you can see, or the yellow arrow there, give you an approximate location of the site and also usefully shows Great Blakenham and Claydon and also the A14 trunk road. This hatched area you can see on plan is the area to which outline planning permission has been granted for B1 and B8 use, or principally B1 B8 use. In effect, the whole of that area shown hatched has outline planning permission for commercial and industrial uses. The area of the site that you're being asked to consider, the overall site you're being asked to consider today is edged red here. And you'll see it's got an access leading up to a point of access on the main road. And the other areas that are under the ownership or control of the applicant are shown edged blue. The constraints map, there's limited constraints that would be impacted or the effect, the consideration of the application. You've got a cluster of listed buildings in this location to the south, and you've got a TPO, as you can see, is away to the north, and special landscape designation, which is on the other side of the main road. Unfortunately, it doesn't come out very green, but it follows that roughly that line there. So the SLA is on the other side of the road. This plan shows the hatched area I referred to previously as the overall development site, and this is the extent of flood zones 2 and 3. So as you can see, it's outside of flood zones. And lastly, that plan shows potentially contaminated land, and the area is shown as being outside of that. This is an aerial map which will give you an idea of land uses in the location. As you can see, to the northeast, it's generally commercial development, and the wider area is mainly rural, houses dispersed within that. This is this is the plan of the proposed development. Excuse me, what you're being asked to look at is this building here, which is essentially a large box, which is going to be, is proposed for use for B8 storage and distribution use, and a smaller element here, which is B1, which is the administration element of the building. This area here is the lorry park, where people will come in, lorries will come in and deliver and collect goods, and this area on the corner is staff parking. The other thing I'd think is worth pointing out at this point is the landscaping proposal on the corner, bearing in mind that this is reserve matters application and landscaping is one of the elements that you're being asked to consider. The green area, I should point out that the north point on this plan is actually that way, confusingly. So the area, the blue area to the south of the site shows an attenuation basin, but you're not being asked to consider the appropriateness of that because surface water drainage was considered as part of the outline planning application, and a series of conditions were attached to the outline planning permission, which are in the process of being considered at this point in time. This is the design of the proposed building. As you can say, as I described recently, it is fundamentally a large box, a large single volume unit. It has been broken down by dint of the use of piled roofs here to suggest incremental volumes. The other approach to try and break down the overall mass is the use of different coloured materials, different shades of grey metallic material in a banding, which helps to deal with the overall volume. And that element in the corner there you can just see is the office administration point, and the gates for, the access points for the lorries. This is the floor plan, fairly simple as you'd expect, a lot of area given over to storage, racked storage, and you can see in the left-hand bottom part the admin area I've referred to, and that is a floor plan of that. Various views to finish off with. This is the land at present. You'll note the existing industrial development in the vicinity, including the waste treatment plant here. Again, you can see an edge of the waste treatment plant, and also this will give you some idea. This photograph and this photograph and the following one of the sort of topography. It is a sloping site. It slopes down towards the south, so any development on this site will have some sort of prominence in the overall landscape. And that feature there is an existing band of hedging and trees, which is on the southern end of the site, which would assist in the screening provision. And I've included that as an example of a building nearby, which again, as you can see, its form follows function. It's a simplistic commercial structure. I'd like to think that what you're being asked to consider today is probably pushing the envelope out a bit further than that, making a bit more of an effort in terms of visual impact, bearing in mind the functional nature of the structure. I'll leave that slide up as I finish my presentation. Again, I think it's useful in terms of context. Briefly, this is the existing commercial development to the north and to the north-east. The site we're talking about sits approximately in that location here, and the nearest dwellings are in this location, some of which has been identified in my report are listed. So overall, we think that this is an acceptable planning response as a reserved matters application for an industrial building on what is an agreed industrial site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yep, Councillor Hanningham.
Has the Floods Authority holding objection been sorted out?
Yes. Referring back to what I said about discharge conditions, what happened in this particular case, we had a discharge condition application and this reserved matters application. Consultation responses went out to both sets of consultees on both, but the distinction wasn't understood between the two, I don't think, by the consultees in their response. So the issues in relation to drainage and surface water are actually being addressed under the discharge of condition application, and they're not relevant to the consideration of this. But as it's a background paper, it should be considered or included in your bundle.
Councillor Welland.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. You showed us slide 18. You showed us a building with a flat roof. How does the height of that building compare with the height of the proposed building, please? It was slide 18.
In truth, I haven't measured the height of that. I would dare say, because of the overall volume and eaves height and the use of that building, I'd dare say that was equivalent in height, but in truth, I can't tell you exactly what the difference is.
The next
the applicant, we can probably ask the applicant.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. The banding, which adds a bit of interest, I've seen lots of buildings with banding. Usually the darkest is at the bottom and the lightest is at the top, so that it tends to sort of go into the sky a bit. This is the other way around. That seems rather odd. Was there pre-app discussion about that?
The applicant's nodding with his finger up, so I think there's another question for him there if you haven't got anything you want to add.
Well,
to
I
that.
guess the next question is also...
Hold on, just in case. Anything you want to...
I haven't got any particular comment about that if it's going to be addressed by the applicant's agent.
The other question was going to be, is there a need for visitors' car park? We've talked about lorry parking and staff parking. Are there likely to be visitors in vans or cars or whatever?
The standard that's applied is a maximum standard, as I've said in the report. That takes into account staff, and I think that there's spaces for disabled motorists and cyclists as well. I suspect, again, by dint of use, that all the spaces wouldn't be occupied at the same time, so therefore there is an inference that there isn't actually a visitor standard in relation to B1 and B8 as far as I'm aware. I think that's encompassed within the whole standard, but I think we're happy with the amount that's being promoted under this scheme.
Any other questions? No? Yeah. Go for it. Councillor Eastman.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask about lighting? What lighting is proposed of this site?
There are no proposals for lighting under this submission because it's reserved matters for the building, but it's an important point because as part of the conditions are imposed on the outline, there was one specifically in relation to lighting for each phase of the development, so that would be controlled under that as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have no one from the Parish Council, no objection, no supporter, but we do have the agent and the applicant, Mr Nick Davey and Larry Isherwood, if you'd like to come up. I think you already know some of the questions, but first of all, if we could go into 3 minutes, please, and we will, you could keep to the 3 minutes. And we can take questions after.
Members, thank you very much. If it's okay, I'll deal with those issues during questions, otherwise I'll eat into my 3 minutes. Yeah. So I have Mr Richard with me here. He's from the developer, the applicant, so he can also answer any questions at the end that you may have. So yes, this is the first of the warehouse logistics buildings that is being brought forward under the outline planning permission which the council has granted. Under that permission and conditions which we've been working our way through and discharging, we've dealt with ecology, archaeology, transport, landscape access, visual impact, trees and neighbours, etc. And this the design of this building is based upon the details which were in the design and access statement and the drawings which the council saw as part of that outline application. So the heights are all set at that outline application stage of the building. It's also achieves all the council's requirements as set out in the conditions for sustainability and BREEAM, and it will generate a proportion of its own energy via photovoltaic cells on the roof. Groundworks have also been designed so that no earth needs to be taken off site. We're taking advantage of the slope or imported onto site. The concrete and the aggregate for the floor slabs, they will all be sourced locally from within 2 miles. The internal lighting scheme, that's low, it will be low energy. Rainwater will be harvested to irrigate the landscape proposals. And under the Section 106 agreement, a dedicated bus service is going to be provided between the site, Great Blakenham and Ipswich for the life of the development, and that's all secured under the 106 agreement, which is part of the outline consent. So as confirmed by your planning officer, the proposal is fully compliant with the principles established at the outline stage. And I'd like to emphasise that this is not a speculative scheme. We have a tenant lined up, heads of terms agreed, to take a 25-year lease of the building. They are the FDS group, who are currently based on the Ransom's Business Park, and they're looking to greatly expand their UK operations, and they need a much larger building, and this is where they want to come. so they can do all their operations from this site rather than shipping in stuff from abroad. It represents a £16.5 million investment for my client, as well as a multi-million-pound investment for FDS. And when completed, we're told that it will initially employ 60 to 80 full-time staff working 3 shifts, and that's expected to rise to 120 to 150 within 2 years. As your planning officer said, there is one outstanding outline application, other application dealing with all the other conditions precedent, and surface water drainage and the drainage lagoon is all part of that application. And there are ongoing discussions which are nearing fruition with the LLFA and the county. So we hope the members can endorse the officer recommendation and approve the consent. If you can, work will start in early September on this scheme, and it's due for completion by June 2020. My client also has a number of other tenants lined up for 3 other buildings. They're just waiting for work to commence, and then they're going to commit to leases as well. And that
I'm
should be
afraid
another
the 3 minutes is up,
jobs.
so if you just have the last sentence, please.
Yeah. Finally, so just one final thing I've been asked to say, it is very important that consent be granted today. We need to deliver this to FDS by June 2020. If we can't get on site by September, that puts that in jeopardy, and both SDS and the funding may walk away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now,
Happy to ask any
I'll
questions.
leave Councillor Wellham. You want to go first with your question?
Thank you. I would like to add one other question, if I may. The first question was, will there be visitors other than just staff and lorries? Is it totally a lorries in, lorries out, or is it lorries in, do some work, cars come and collect stuff that you're selling? And the other question, 2 other questions. One was the height. Is it a similar height to the building that we saw on the slide? And why is the banding t'other way around from what I would have expected?
Please correct me if or shall I answer and you can correct me if I get anything wrong? Yes, it's lorries in, lorries out. All goods move in and out by lorries. No one will come and collect, clients will come and collect from the site. So the car park is purely for staff and the odd visitor who may come to discuss a contract or something of that nature. And then you also have the dedicated bus service I've described earlier, which has to be in place before any unit on the site is occupied. As to height, it is larger than the building you saw on that site. It's sort of more equivalent to the incinerator unit next door. But that was all discussed at the outline stage, and the key thing there, and this also goes to the banding, was views from Clayton on the other side of the valley. We were asked to make sure that the building was below the line of the trees, which are along the southern and the western boundaries of the site. If you go to the, if you could see the aerial photograph. For that reason, that's also the reason why the banding works the other way. Normally, you're quite right, the lighter banding will be at the top, so the top of the building disappears a bit into the sky. Here, the top of the building isn't going to be seen against the sky, it's going to be seen against the trees along the western and the southern boundaries. And it was felt, right from the initial stage, the best way to deal with the mass of the building was to actually have the banding working the other way. So that's the reason it goes up to top rather than lightens as it goes up.
Don't say you don't learn something new every time we do this committee. Any other questions?
It's 18 metres to the top. Yeah.
Any other questions from colleagues?
But it's also dug in, so it's a lot of cut and fill there, which is why we don't have to import or take any earth off site.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
The ward member is Councillor Field, who has sent an email because he can't be here today, so I'll read this out. My views on the application are as follows. The land at Blackacre Hill, Bromford Road, Great Blakenham is an appropriate location for the form of logistics related to development proposed in this application, situated close to the A14 Claydon Junction. The economic benefit to the area will be welcome. The site is connected to the Claydon Junction by 1 kilometre, approximately, of dual carriageway, a traffic light controlled right turn to a few hundred metres single carriageway, and a left turn entrance. Vehicles entering or leaving the site have no need to pass residential properties. Traffic through these junctions is at peak hours approaching capacity, with queues building to some tens of vehicles, so a transport plan that scheduled HGV arrivals and departures to avoid such times would be advantageous both to other users of the route and to the operators of the facility. The committee should note that this is a route used by vehicles accessing Lion, Barn, Estate and Needham Market. Locations isolated by traffic restrictions at Needham Market, such as Washersham Airfield, Claydon Business Park and dwellings, include the new 417 and 130 home developments in Blakenham Fields and Blakenham Mill. I am concerned that the Officer's recommendation accepts a building that is identified as 48 metres high, some 10 metres higher than the adjacent incinerator, on the basis that the new building is of similar industrial form to its award-winning neighbour. My concern is more about the accuracy of the assessment, as a brief examination of the drawings reveals the height is an AOD figure and ground level is 30 metres AOD, giving a building weight height of 18 metres. However, I'd like that confirmed. If the report's figure is correct, then the buildings will dominate residential properties nearby. My final comment would be around the drainage arrangements. The Parish Council correctly points to the flooding issues of the Bromford Road, and the county appears to be still of the view that drainage proposals are not satisfactory. Officers point out that these matters should be agreed as part of the outline application. However, if permission is given to proceed with the development without agreement, there is a strong presumption that nothing will change. Councillor Johnfield. Well, I'm happy to start off if no one else really wants to. I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for Mid-Suffolk to bring a business in that's in a location next to the Energy for Waste, which is something that's dear to all our hearts as it's multi-award winning. And to hear that actually they're going for BREEAM status, the concrete is coming, or the base of the unit's coming locally. Clearly the environmental impact has been considered. The colour coding shows the thought and consideration that's gone in to try and mitigate the local concerns. The PV panels that have been talked about. The flooding issues we've covered, and I believe that has been addressed, but I'll just like confirmation from the officer that the point that John Field makes, that is addressed as well. And quite frankly, you know, we want to encourage growth in Mid-Suffolk, and to have a company of this size wanting to move and base itself in Mid-Suffolk in what I deem to be a totally appropriate location for that, I think is very much welcome. And clearly great work's gone on between the applicant and Mid-Suffolk to try and engineer something that fits in as well as it can. So from my perspective, I welcome it. Could you just touch on the flooding issue that John Field mentioned, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as part of the outline application, as I said, there was a series of conditions in relation to surface water drainage, both on-site and obviously in relation to the access, which has been dealt with under separate applications. The Highway Authority would consider the elements of the site or the suitability of the scheme put forward in order that a flooding issue wasn't created in relation to the local highway network. So we're happy that both of the elements, both on-site and access, and I think that they cover the concerns that were raised by the Parish Council in that regard.
You can give us total confidence that the issues on the flooding that have been raised by John Field are covered will be covered under the conditions.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Councillor Muller.
Chair, I must admit, I think the economic benefits of this, as you quite rightly point out, Chair, it's going to increase the number of employees. It's a large firm moving to this area. We want to encourage these type of companies to come here. It is an ideal site for this. I fully support this application and therefore move approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor Norris.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to support the recommendation. There have been some mentions of drainage issues by the Parish Council, but I think they've already been covered in the outline application. I know the area quite well. and I think it will bring a lot of economic benefit to the area, so I would be happy to support this recommendation.
Seconding?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else wish to speak? Yep, Councillor Haddingham.
I just want to say that putting on a bus fixture, I think, is going above and beyond the call of duty. Really, I think it's excellent.
Okay, so it's been proposed by Councillor Muller, seconded by Councillor Norris, as per the recommendations laid out in our papers on pages 313 of our papers. All those in favour of the recommendation, can we have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, the final item for today is on page 353 of our papers, application number DC 19-00174. And Vincent, you're taking this on behalf of Catherine, eh? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're looking at variation of condition 3 on a site here at Welham Meadow, Church Road, Battisford. The site sits on the bend in here. Ooh, just there. What we have is a condition on an application permission that restricts the use of 4 new holiday lets to a period that excludes 8th of January to the 8th of February. So there's 1 month in the year that they cannot be occupied, and it is restricted to holiday lets. The applicant is seeking to have that condition lifted in order that there can be all year round occupation, effectively residential use rather than holiday lets. The condition was originally added, you'll see from the bottom of the screen as highlighted in yellow. The site of the permission is outside of any area where planning permission would normally be forthcoming for residential development. The whole of that area is within a triple SI. Here we have the aerial view. You'll notice the pear drop shape, which is pointing out the site. Battisford sits to the northwest of Ipswich on the way to Bury St Edmunds. So here we have what was approved in May 2017. So you'll see that there are 4 cabins, although that doesn't really want to go there. There is 1, 2, 3, 4. These 3 overlook a pond. So there are 4 holiday lets in the form of a log cabin. There is one of the log cabins. There's another one that sits behind it. You can just see the corner of it poking out in the background. So what you're being asked to consider is not the lifting of the condition in respect of all 4. You're looking at changing the condition to allow the 2 log cabins shown in red to be used for residential use. The 2 log cabins shown blue would continue to be available as holiday lets with that restriction. In terms of what is on the site at present, the 2 yellow rectangles represent hard standings, concrete hard standings. When the case officer went out, that is what exists at the moment. The 2 rectangles coloured green are actually the log cabins that have been erected, and they were in that photograph that we just looked at. The actual lifting of the condition relates to 1 existing log cabin and what is a hard standing. There's a shot of the 2 existing log cabins across the pond. This is from the applicant's website. Zooming in, they open out with the sliding doors to have a view of the pond. Again, from the applicant's website, here you'll notice it's suggesting you can buy one of the cabins on a 99-year lease for 150. Is that 150? Yeah, 150,000. Also on the website, this is just a promotional video. There is no sound. If we can get that to work.
It's too good. I couldn't have the best day there, that's it.
That's the presentation. I'm happy to take questions as and when they arise, Chair.
I'm afraid I've got a ton. I don't understand. So planning application was only given back 18 months ago. Is that correct? Sorry, in May 2017.
Correct.
To build 4 holiday homes, of which only 2 have been built, and an application has come in to convert one that isn't even built to be sold off as an individual property.
That is correct, although I can't necessarily say it is being sold off.
But in theory, for what's being applied, it's a freestanding house that could be sold off as a separate.
Yes.
I know we're saying a 99-year lease, but
yes.
But what effectively is being asked for is for something that isn't even built and hasn't been occupied and hasn't actually run as a business to be sold off as a separate dwelling, is what's being asked for.
Effectively, yes.
Right. Okay. And it's within an area where you cannot build houses like this, if you so wished.
Ordinarily, you would not expect to approve new dwellings in the open countryside, hence the reason for the shown on that condition originally. Right. It was restricted to holiday lets because that's how it was promoted and that was identified as the need.
Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Wellham.
Chair, thank you. Are the parking standards for residential homes different from parking standards for holiday lets? Ditto garaging and bin collection, and there probably are other things as well, but if I can ask about those 3.
In terms of parking standards, as it sits within a farm, there is more than enough space for anyone to park. In terms of the refuse collection, I'm not sure what the arrangements are. It could be that the applicant has a commercial arrangement to have waste rubbish from the units collected not via the council service. I don't know. I also don't know how well used the 2 existing units are and how much rubbish they generate. So it's not an entirely adequate answer, but that is the answer I have to give you at this stage.
I haven't finished my questions, if that's right, if I can jump the queue. So can I just need clarity on this. So when someone comes forward with a holiday unit, normally they sort of build a business case and you say this is why I want to do it because you believe there's demand in the area for holiday accommodation. So can you go from not actually having delivered that, so the business case hasn't been stacked up because it hasn't all been built, it's not all up and running, to suddenly stop that halfway through? I mean, is there no condition that actually the first approval has to actually be up and running? It's like a pub. We have pubs come here that want to convert to a house and they have to have a business plan to show that they've tried to make a go of it to then convert it into something else. Is there nothing on this approach?
You may feel there's a deficiency in our policies, But you're quite right. Ordinarily, if you expected somebody to want a house in the countryside, let's say for an essential agricultural worker, you would expect them to present a business case and for that restriction to be applied in perpetuity, because the only reason you will have allowed it is because it is required for an essential agricultural worker. When it comes to holiday lets, we do not have a policy with that same rigour. So somebody promotes a proposal as being good for tourism. You'll be familiar with the fact that the council, the district, advertises its tourism attraction as having great access to the countryside. This is in the countryside. It is remote from settlements. Therefore, you would expect there to be a demand for a cabin adjacent to a pond in the open countryside. What we haven't got is evidence to indicate why that hasn't succeeded, how well it was marketed. You saw an extract, but that isn't necessarily on the... you have to search hard to find it. I think it is a policy issue, because you're quite right. There does seem to be a tension between attracting tourism in the form of holiday lets and resisting residential development in the open countryside.
No physical works are proposed as the units, vehicle access and parking exist. They don't exist.
They don't exist physically yet, but they exist as permitted, something that's permitted under the permission. That's the point, isn't it?
But I come back to the proposal in front of us. No physical works are required.
What I would say, Chairman, is that we haven't been out in recent weeks. Whether or not other cabins have emerged, perhaps is something you might want to ask the applicant if they intend to.
But it does say, let's be absolutely clear, it says no physical works are proposed as it's existing. But it's not existing, as the photos show. When was the last site visit done by an officer on this?
I believe that was in March or May.
Okay, well, we can ask the applicant, or I suppose we could do a site visit. Any other questions at this point? No? Okay. So we'll move on. So thank you for that. We don't have the parish council. Now, the parish council can't be here, and they have submitted something in our late papers. So I'm not going to read it out because I wouldn't normally do that, but because they can't be here, they have submitted in the late papers on page 17, so long as members have seen that, and that just came in on the 22nd of July. So we have, that's from the parish council. We have no objector, no supporter, but we do have the applicant, Georgina Knock and Chris Knock. If you'd like to come up for your 3 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm Georgina Knock, and this is my father, Chris Knock, who will help with the questions today. In 2016, our family farming business realised that we needed a new source of income for the business to survive and bring in the next generation, which is myself and my brother, James. And there was an existing leisure enterprise at Wellham's Meadow with the 2 fishing lakes, which are rented out with Gipping Angular Club. We consulted with the anglers about placing the lodges next to the lakes, and they happily agreed, and we're thankful that we approached them in the first place. We obtained planning permission for the 4 lodges at Wellham's Meadow on the farm in May 2017. The first 2 lodges were delivered in August 2017 from Suffolk-based manufacturers up in Brandon. During 2018, we sold 1 lodge for recreational use and rented out the other one, which is on site, from summer 2018 up to summer 2019. However, during 2018, we were repeatedly asked by numerous inquirers if they could live there, since we've been carefully landscaping the place and creating a beautiful place. We've also won awards for our sustainability practice, especially regarding renewable energy on site. We applied for pre-app advice on whether we could alter the condition 3 on the permission to change recreational to designation residential for 2 of the 4 plots. Based on the positive pre-app response, we then submitted the application. So we can still run a leisure recreational business alongside 2 residential lodges on site. We also asked if we could have 12 months use of the recreational lodges rather than the present 11 months. The pre-app advice was given on 12th of December 2018, and this concluded, I quote, "It is unlikely that the council would oppose the reconstruction of condition 3 on the planning commission and the conversion of the recreational use. Some of the lodges were not unacceptable, given the weight of the inspectorate decisions sitting behind them." Also in pre-app advice was a request that the council would want to be assured regarding the level of residential amenity offered to the potential permanent occupants of the lodges. With this advice, we submitted the application on the 11th of January 2019. Given the 2 plots of residential use, more private amenity, and the landscape has matured beautifully to fit in with the natural character of the area. They've also allocated more parking spaces and storage space close to the 2 plots. The security on site will also benefit from having people there all year round. Regarding the point raised from the parish council, they did not follow protocol and allow for my father to have the 3 minutes where he would have been able to explain the positive pre-app advice from the council. Therefore, an uninformed decision was made. For these reasons above, I would like to ask the committee if the plot 1 and plot 4 can be changed to residential designation, and for plot 2 and 3 to be changed to a 12-month recreational designation. For the chairman's point regarding the lodge not on site yet, it allows the person to bespoke the design of the lodge, and that's what we feel very important to do. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. You just went over 3 minutes. I let you because you were answering a question that we had. Councillor Haddingham, questions.
Did you say that you'd already sold one of the lodges?
We did, but that fell through just a couple of months ago, so it didn't reach completion, unfortunately.
I have got a copy here of the pre-app advice, and the pre-app advice was, "It is unlikely that the council would be receptive to a complete removal of the restrictive condition on the use of holiday lets, and from the discussion held at the meeting, it is unlikely that while some of the lodges were being considered for conversion to residential use, 2 others could remain as holiday units." And that's a record, our record of the meeting and that letter was sent to you on the 12th of December 2018. Condition. It is unlikely that the council would be receptive to a complete removal of the restrictive condition on the use of the holiday lets. And from the discussion held at the meeting, it is likely that while some of the lodges were being considered for conversion to a residential use, 2 others would remain as holiday lets. The condition clearly then still serves a purpose with regards to the units remaining as holiday lets, and it is considered reasonable that this use would still be restricted. No, so that doesn't bind the committee in any way, but it's just the minutes and a letter that was sent from that meeting so that everyone's clear what was discussed. Any questions? Can I just ask a question? So you've only built 2 out of the 4?
On site, yes.
On site. And so when you started the business, it was to build 4, and that was to be the business, but you've only built 2, and before testing whether the business works fully by building the 4, you're trying to change it already. Is there any particular reason why the 4 never got built out?
Restrictive cash flows.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're restricted for cash flow, so we're just waiting until we can actually get the next phase with the 2 lodges on site, which would be exactly the same exterior. There might be a different layout, for example. We've had requests if they want 2 master bedrooms at either end, for example, so the layout can change. But the exterior and the size would be exactly the same.
And they're sold on a 99-year lease, I saw, is what you're saying once. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions at all? Councillor Haddingham.
So how far are you from the nearest village, sorry?
So Battisford's 3.5 miles long, and so the centre of population in Battisford's a mile away. That's where the pub is. So there's two churches, and so we're very close to St Mary's Church on the site, and then there's the Free Church, which is also near the Battisford tie-in. So it's a very, very long, thin village.
Schools?
No schools. No, it's a small village, population of sort of 500, so it's a small.
There is a nursery.
Oh, sorry.
There is a nursery for small children, yes.
Buses? Public transport?
Yeah, there's one bus on a Monday.
Any other questions at all? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The ward member's Councillor Daniel Pratt, and he has sent in an email, and I'll just read that out as well. Permission sought to allow 2 plots to be used for permanent residential use is acceptable in principle of the planning policy adopted by Mid-Suffolk District Council, since the change of use does not amount to a new development or cause any change to the character of the area. To a large extent, I have no objection to the proposal, as there appears to be limited arguments to suggest that the change from recreational to permanent residential use would cause unacceptable harm. The units offer the potential for accommodation that uses renewable energy and is less dependent on the national grid, which is positive for sustainable living. However, Battisford Parish Council's response to the proposal and the reasons outlined in their objection should be considered carefully. The Parish Council consent to the original application in 2017 on the basis that the development of accommodation would support the promotion of tourism locally and in the county. To my understanding, the original application was permitted as a unit for holiday purposes in the interests of contributing to tourism and the economy of the area, providing custom for the Punch Bowl community pub and the employment of 3 local people in a part-time capacity. The development would potentially cease to impart these benefits following a change of use. Further to this point, it is possible that a decision to permit a change of use could negatively impact support from the parish councils for tourism developments forthcoming. Therefore, I feel that in the case of approval of this application, the terms need to be set out for any future developments on the site going forward. So, members, we've had all the information put before us, and we've heard from the applicant, we've heard from the ward member. It's really over us to discuss and debate. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just got a concern that we wouldn't ever approve a house in this area. You wouldn't approve anything for residential use. It's in a beautiful area, you know, in a triple SI. It's clear that people are using it as a holiday destination, and if the anglers, they're using the lake and so on. So I've just got a concern we wouldn't, we wouldn't approve it for residential use normally. And if the other lodges are being used for holiday use, then clearly there is some kind of business there, but not that we can tell from any business plan we've got here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. I think my main concern here relates to paragraph 3.11 on page 358. The fact that in the past the planning inspectorate have actually allowed this sort of development. But I find this area quite confusing because we've got other areas within Mid-Suffolk that are quite controversial with so-called holiday lets where people have to move out for a year. And I just wonder, I find it difficult to make a decision on this particular one based on that, because obviously if the planning inspector are likely to allow it, but I do agree with what Councillor Eburn say, we wouldn't normally allow a sort of residential accommodation to be built on this site. So it's
Can I just ask maybe the officer just to touch on the appeals and where that stands, and based on what Councillor Eburn said, where we would stand in terms of if that was a route to go down, where would that take us?
Yep, no problem at all. So there's been a variety of appeal decisions across the country about holiday let versus residential use. It has been found to be a C3 use, so it is a residential use. So where we come to the particular Mid-Suffolk decision is more helpful, which I've got here. I'll just reference a couple of points. is what the inspector was saying is whether or not the site's appropriate location for permanent residential development, living conditions and the tourism and leisure industry. Now, what she looked at in terms of the location in this case, this was just to the north of Eye Airfield, so it was very close to Eye, that it would be close proximity to existing houses, that it's, while it's some distance from facilities and services, they would access those local services in Eye, for example. Should we go through the other points? And that they're also saying that the units are there, therefore the change and the comparison between you were there as a holiday or you're there and you live there was limited. So I think the fact that we don't have one of the units on site is definitely an area of difference. In terms of the location, if members wanted to consider the differences between, so this site is just the north of Eye Airfield, how, where and why you access those services versus Battisford, in essentially we have to consider, we have got this decision that does say, yep, you can use those holiday lets for residential use. Does it affect the access to services? We can consider that. What about the living conditions? Again, we could consider that. I think primarily this point of view, I would say the main differences are we've got a unit that's not on site. It doesn't exist. Yes, they have consent to do that, but it would amount to us granting planning permission for a brand new dwelling on this site, which I think Vince has alluded to. I'm not sure that would be something we would generally support if they came in with a planning application for a new house. Therefore, that might be something members want to discuss. The fact that we are losing the benefits that they suggested would come in without evidence, whether that is something that's a concern, whether you'd like us to review that and come back, or if that's sufficiently concerning that there would be other ways you'd like to take that. So yes, there are appeal decisions where we have, in a sense, lost holiday lets. And I would say, yes, there are cases now where if we've got a holiday let and somebody applies and says, great, I'm going to change it to residential, we are not going to have argument against it. I think that's where the officer's recommendation has come from, is that what are the arguments? And what I would say is we need to think of the differences between here and with Eye. So yeah, the inspector was saying very much that they would access those local services. Yes, they would be by car, but they would support them, and that they weren't convinced that the loss would be harmful. So it's again that harm, and if we were talking about the benefit to the business, would the loss of those to the business be harmful? I think one of the arguments made at the application was about business diversification. I think the applicant mentioned that as diversification. How do members feel that would go? Hopefully that helps, because it is quite a long appeal decision, so I appreciate it wasn't particularly brief, but hopefully it helps.
So just to summarise, the issue really is about the fact that it's not actually built out, the fact that no business has actually been running to justify in the beginning on the initial application, and the accessibility to the local shops, i.e. Eye versus Battisford being totally in a rural area. So are they the three key points that?
Yeah, I think if we talk about concerns for that obviously we've got the new house in itself is a sort of matter on its own. The fact that it was recently developed, the second unit, and whether that would be the loss of the holiday unit in itself, would it have an impact on economic opportunities for the tourist economy, given that was the benefits put forward? Would it safeguard sustainable rural tourism? Also, in terms of facilities and services, there is obviously that difference between tourism and residential, so would members have concerns about social services, that's the wrong word, but schools and social infrastructure is probably a better way of putting that. And obviously, as I mentioned, the fact that all of these benefits were put forward for the original application in terms of supporting the angling club, supporting local tourism economy, supporting the farm and diversifying its business, whether they are issues that members feel weigh one way or the other, where we get to is, has it got benefits, has it got adverse impacts, and which outweighs the other?
Thank you. Well, that helps a lot, I think. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it does help a great deal. What I have going around in my head is we have got 2 units on site which are perfectly livable in, and they are holiday lets. We've got 2 concrete slabs. If the applicant were to put in an application for housing development of those 2 slabs using the design and everything else as per the original application, would we be sitting here thinking it was a good idea? Where I'm coming from is, I don't think that I would be persuaded that to put that sort of building on that slab and from the outset saying it's going to be a residential property, presumably paying seal money and so on, everything that goes with residential development, I would not be comfortable with that.
Anyone else wish to come in? Councillor Eburn, do you want to pick up anything on the points you've heard? Yeah, anyone else? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So it seems to me this application is a speculative one based on the fact that they've got to struggle with cash flow and want to change the sort of terms of what they originally intended to do. Whether or not that makes a great deal of difference in the end to the amount of money spent in the local pub and so forth, I don't know. But it seems to me that were we to allow this, it is in a sense allowing residential development by the back door.
I think you've summed up what we're all thinking. That's exactly what I mean. That's what it. We would not allow houses in this site. If it came forward for 4 houses in that yard, we would say no straight away, or it wouldn't even come to committee. Actually, it would because it would, but this one would. But okay. So how do we take this forward? So, is there anyone that has a differing view to that? Just so we know, so we start heading in one direction. So, I think, Gemma, I think the general view is that this would never be allowed to come forward if it was in this location.
So we've got one new dwelling that's not in a sustainable location. Would that be fair to say that's members?
And Keith was talking about the tourism.
Yep.
So, the application was for a tourist venue, and you're losing that tourism. Someone talked about being a mile away. Is a mile away from that's not yeah. Is that sustainable? Yeah, I think that's the other question. Anything else?
Well, it's a new building in an SSSR.
Yeah. Because it's not built out. So, can you summarise that?
Would you maybe just give me a minute
or
two?
Give you a couple
I've
minutes.
typed some notes, but I think it might help if I've got something in a bit more order and just to bear with me.
We'll give you a couple of minutes.
That would be helpful, thank you.
We'll just put a hold on
thank you.
for a few minutes. Just to make your day, the canteen is shut due to it being too hot. The air conditioning's packed up with the excess heat from cooking with the outside temperature. So we're in no rush because there's no lunch anyway.
Sorry, it's fairly long because I tried to pick up on the various points. So we talked about the holiday let and the fact that one's not been built, so I hope I picked up on that, but if there's other things members would like me to change, I'm happy to do that. So you're minded to refuse on the grounds that the recently developed units, in one case not having been constructed, would result in new residential development in the countryside contrary to CS1, CS2, FC1 and FC1.1, would not constitute a sustainable form of development in the countryside, and that the loss of these permitted holiday units would undermine the objective of safeguarding economic opportunities for the visitor and tourist economy of the district, evidenced within the Council's visitor destination plan, Ipswich Area Sector Needs Assessment 2017, and Open for Business Strategy, contrary to local plan policies H11 and RT19. On this basis, the application would fail to demonstrate that it would safeguard sustainable rural tourism sector, contrary to MPPF paragraph 83C, rural housing policies in paragraph 77 and 78, and with a new dwelling also being contrary to paragraphs 8 and 11 of the MPPF. Moreover, there is no evidence to demonstrate that this would be a form of rural housing which would be responsive to the local circumstances, reflect local needs, nor enhance or maintain the vitality of rural communities, having regard to the application documentation and its location poorly related to services and facilities, whereby occupants would be expected to rely upon the private car to access relevant infrastructure, in particular education, healthcare and community service on a regular basis, not equivalent to the impacts identified with the holiday units. In addition, the proposal would result in the loss of benefit from such units, which were identified as supporting the farm business and diversifying its income streams, while supporting the angling club and other businesses in the area, as detailed in the supporting statement to the original application. It has not been demonstrated that the proposal would continue to offer these, or that the loss would be outweighed by any benefits of this proposal. Whilst residential use would support services to some degree, this would not have the same benefits with regard to the farm business, angling club and tourism business, specifically identified as benefiting during the application. Furthermore, given the lack of sustainable access and impact on infrastructure, it is considered that the proposal would have adverse impacts not outweighed by benefits, contrary to the MPPF. Does that cover what members were considering?
Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. In view of what Gemma has just said, I would therefore move refusal of this application.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, Councillor Haddingham. So, anyone else wish to speak? So it's been proposed for refusal by Councillor Muller, seconded for refusal by Councillor Haddingham on the grounds that have been read out before us. All those in favour of refusal of the application for those reasons. Can we have a show of hands, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7. Those against?
I'm not against, but I think I should abstain on this application, as I've already declared a non-pecuniary interest.
You don't have to, because if you wish to abstain, that's a separate matter. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. So that is refused. Okay, members. So thank you very much. There's no other no site visits, no other urgent business. If I could just ask you to take your cups with you when you leave the chamber. Thank you very much. There is cool beans over the road, don't forget. I'm not sure how cool it'll be, but...